At the victory banquet, jade cups passed from hand to hand, while civil and military officials filled the hall with lively conversation. The emperor's face was flushed with pleasure, and he was in especially high spirits. Again and again he raised his cup and praised Xiao Guang as a rare and outstanding general. I sat among the titled ladies. As I looked at the man in dark armor standing in the middle of the great hall, my fingers tightened unconsciously around my wine cup. He had actually come back alive. Over the years I had grown used to managing the vast general's manor by myself. I admired flowers in the morning, brewed tea in the afternoon, and sometimes stayed for half a month at the estate outside the capital. Whenever I was bored, a flock of children would gather around me, chattering as they called me mother. Now that Xiao Guang was standing here again, I knew those peaceful days were probably coming to an end. While I was lost in thought, I suddenly felt a burning gaze on me. I turned my head and met Gu Yuanliang's furious eyes. He gritted his teeth and shot Xiao Guang a glare, but when he looked back at me, his expression immediately changed into a pitiful, aggrieved look, like a terribly mistreated young wife. I leaned back and hurriedly raised my sleeve to cover nearly half my face. It was all because, back then, I had heard that a general had died at the Northern Front. I had been so delighted that I lost my head, drank too much, and behaved improperly toward this deputy minister of the Court of Judicial Review. I thought it had been one absurd drunken night, and that, once we woke, each of us would go our separate way. Instead, he stuck to me like glue and refused to let go. Only later did I learn that the man who died was not Xiao Guang at all, but a deputy general of the Xiao clan. That hero had become an undeserved casualty of Xiao Guang's reckless advance. As I was thinking about this, a figure dressed in white suddenly rose from her seat and rushed straight into Xiao Guang's arms. She wore plain white mourning clothes with not a single ornament in her hair. In the magnificent golden hall, she looked completely out of place. The lively atmosphere fell silent at once. The emperor narrowed his eyes and set down his cup. Even his smile faded slightly. Changel, you went to a foreign land in a marriage alliance for the sake of the realm and suffered greatly. Now that you have returned, is there anything you wish for? Princess Changel raised her face. Tears shimmered on her lashes. I receive a stipend from the court, so it is only right that I serve the realm. I have never complained. She secretly glanced at Xiao Guang, then lowered her eyes as if shy. But your majesty, my husband was killed by brother Xiao on the battlefield. I have nowhere to rely on now. I ask only that your majesty grant brother Xiao to me, so that we may continue the bond we once had. The two of them did indeed have an old history. Years ago, during a spring hunt, the grass was green, and the birds were singing when Princess Changel's horse suddenly went wild and charged straight toward me. Without regard for his safety, Xiao Guang threw himself forward and knocked me to the ground out of the horse's path, saving me from being trampled. Everyone at the hunting ground cried out in alarm, then praised General Xiao for heroically saving a beauty. It became a celebrated romantic tale. Much later, I learned the truth. Xiao Guang and Princess Changel had already been in love for a long time. That day, Xiao Guang had casually remarked, Yun Xiaoyue's smile is especially bright today. Changel flew into a rage. She deliberately struck her horse hard and sent it charging toward me. It had never been an accident. When no one was around, Xiao Guang and Changel had a fierce argument. Changel struck him with her whip and shouted, If Yun Xiaoyue is so pleasing to your eyes, then go marry her. Xiao Guang touched the burning mark on his face and lost his temper as well. Fine. I'll go to the Yun family and ask for her hand right away. Don't regret it when I do. Both of them were hot-tempered, and neither would lower their head first. In anger, Xiao Guang really did bring betrothal gifts to the Yun residence the next day. He kept repeating, a life-saving favor should be repaid with marriage. My parents had no idea what had happened between him and Changel, so they reluctantly agreed. Changel, meanwhile, went into the palace and complained to the emperor that she had fallen for an unworthy man. Half joking and half serious, she said she was willing to marry into Northern Dai as part of a political alliance. After the Grand Princess died, the emperor had always been especially protective of Changel. She was certain he would never truly send her to such a distant and harsh place. Yet the very next day, an imperial decree arrived at her residence. The matter was settled beyond reversal. Only then did the two of them regret what they had done. But I was the one who ultimately paid the price for their anger and regret. From the day I married into the general's manor, Xiao Guang hardly looked at me, let alone shared a marriage bed with me. He blamed me for everything that had led to Changel's political marriage. Whenever he drank too much, he would curse me with red-rimmed eyes, accusing me of using despicable schemes and deliberately dressing too beautifully at the spring hunt to attract his attention. I never showed a trace of resentment. Instead, I managed the general's manor in perfect order. After all, everyone said I was virtuous. Later, when word spread that the court intended to campaign against Northern D, Xiao Guang volunteered eagerly in the Great Hall. I invited the Xiao clan elders over and in one breath arranged 10 honored concubines for him. A battlefield was dangerous after all. I was thinking of the Xiao family's future, and I chose each woman carefully. One had been sold by her parents so they could raise a bride price for her brother. Another had been falsely accused and nearly condemned to be drowned in a cage. Another had lost her farmland to her clansmen and been driven from her home. They were all respectable women who should have had the chance to live safely and with dignity. The clan elders praised my generosity endlessly. Under their arrangements, Xiao Guang spent 10 days taking restorative tonics while the concubines took turns attending to him, one each day. 10 days later, the women were rosy-faced, their expressions carrying unmistakable satisfaction. Xiao Guang, on the other hand, had to steady himself against the wall, his legs trembling when he came to confront me. Before he could even demand an explanation, the imperial decree ordering the northern campaign arrived at the manor. Before he left, I laid out 10 release documents. If the general truly does not want them, then let it end here. Each of these women can return to her own life. From this day forward, she will have nothing more to do with you. Xiao Guang was in a hurry to report to the military camp. He grabbed a brush and signed every document without even looking closely. The final clause stated clearly that if any concubine became pregnant, the child would take the mother's family name and be raised by her. From then on, neither mother nor child would have any relationship with the general's manor. Back in the palace banquet hall, the emperor frowned slightly. He clearly found Princess Chang'el's request difficult. My reputation in the capital had always been excellent. During the 5 years Xiao Guang was away at war, everyone knew that his wife lived alone. Each month, I went to the temple to light long-burning lamps and pray for the soldiers, and I set up porridge stalls outside the capital. More importantly, all 10 honored concubines eventually bore children, and every child survived. The Xiao family had many descendants and its ancestral line flourished. Whenever the noble ladies of the capital discussed me in private, they all said the same thing. Lady Yun's virtue was rarely seen in this world. Even the ladies of the imperial household had praised me openly. Unfortunately, Xiao Guang knew none of it. From the moment he escorted Princess Chang'el back from the border, the two of them had been inseparable. They shared the same carriage and stayed at the same relay stations. There was room for no one else in their eyes. Xiao Guang had not once returned to the general's manor, nor had he even sent a letter asking whether anyone there was well. Seeing that the emperor was still hesitating, Xiao Guang immediately dropped to one knee and struck his armored chest with his fist, producing a loud metallic clang. "Your Majesty, I am willing to exchange all my military merit for the chance to marry Princess Chang'el. I beg your Majesty to grant us this marriage." The emperor's gaze swept toward me. I understood at once. It was my turn to step onto the stage. I rose, straightened my skirts and walked forward under countless watching eyes before kneeling before the throne. "Your Majesty," I said, keeping my back straight and my voice clear, "the princess is noble and devoted. She sacrificed herself for the realm, and I know I cannot compare with her. I am willing to step aside for the sake of others. I ask your Majesty to grant General Xiao and me a formal divorce, so that the general and the princess may fulfill the deep affection between them." Xiao Guang seemed not to have expected me to make no scene at all and simply give him exactly what he wanted. For an instant, a strange sense of emptiness rose inside him. He pressed his lips together and blurted, "There is actually no need for a divorce. You could ask to lower your status to concubine and continue living in the manor." "Excellent!" That single word cut him off. Gu Yuanliang stepped leisurely out from the line of civil officials, applauding as he came. His dark crimson court robes made his handsome face look even brighter. "I believe General Xiao's military accomplishments are extraordinary. Yet he asks for neither rank nor wealth, only to remain beside the princess. Such devotion is truly moving." Then he turned toward me and bowed with clasped hands. "Miss Yun understands righteousness and the greater good. She truly lives up to both her reputation for virtue and her position as the cherished daughter of the Vice Minister of Rights. Her generosity and spirit are no less admirable than the princess's sacrifice when she entered a political marriage for the sake of the realm. I ask your majesty to approve the divorce between Miss Yun and General Xiao, and to grant her an additional reward in recognition of her virtue. In this way, the realm will see your majesty's benevolence, and also see that a woman's integrity and character need not be inferior to a man's. Every word came at exactly the right moment and said precisely what the emperor wanted to hear. Civil and military officials nodded together in approval. The emperor stroked his beard with satisfaction and immediately ordered the Hanlin Academy to draft a decree. He granted Xiao Guang and me a formal divorce, along with 100 taels of gold and 100 bolts of fine silk, praising me for understanding the greater good. Once the decree and rewards were announced, the great hall grew lively again. Princess Changle, surrounded by well-wishers, had changed into peach-pink palace dress and stood close beside Xiao Guang. Her smile bloomed like a flower. At a glance, the two of them truly looked like a match made in heaven. While no one was paying attention, I quietly slipped out. I did not notice that Xiao Guang had also left the hall. The night wind cleared the lingering warmth of the wine from my head. Just as I relaxed my tense shoulders, someone stepped out from behind a decorative rockery. It was Xiao Guang. He had removed his armor. I was baffled. Why was he out here instead of remaining inside to accept everyone's congratulations? He looked down at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. Yun Xiaoyu, are you trying to play hard to get? You've taken it too far, haven't you? Before I could answer, he gave a cold laugh. Back then, you used every trick you could to break Changle and me apart so you could marry into my family. You took advantage of the situation, interfered between us, and even had your father submit a memorial recommending Changle for the political marriage. Did you think I didn't know? After 5 years as a lonely wife, have you finally come to your senses? He lifted his chin. Changle and I are the pair fate intended. No matter what you do, I will never love you. He stared at me as if waiting for me to look devastated, panicked, and utterly miserable. I simply wondered whether too many years of warfare had damaged his judgment. I raised one corner of my mouth and answered calmly, General Xiao, whom you love, has nothing to do with me. Xiao Guang froze, clearly not expecting that response. Changle said you deliberately tried to entice me. She said you deliberately provoked her, told your father to submit the memorial about the political marriage, and had your whole family plot against the general's manor. I gave a cold laugh. If you had not come to my home demanding repayment for saving my life and forced the marriage proposal through, why would I ever have married you? Xiao Guang, perhaps you still do not know this. On the day you came to propose, I had already met another family's young master as a prospective husband. You were the one who spread rumors everywhere claiming that there was already an improper relationship between us. You ruined my reputation and forced my parents to accept the marriage. Now you turn around and accuse me of breaking you and Changle apart. You truly have no shame. Xiao Guang's face went pale. He shook his head repeatedly. You're lying. I looked at him with open contempt. Changle said this, Changle said that. You believe everything she tells you. If you trust her that much, why come here to question me? Xiao Guang opened his mouth to argue, but a cool voice sounded from not far away. General Xiao, why are you here? His Majesty was just asking where the guest of honor at tonight's victory banquet had gone. I turned and saw Gu Yanliang standing in the shadowed corridor with his hands behind his back. The hem of his robe moved lightly in the night wind. I had no idea how long he had been there or how much he had heard. He was smiling, but there was no warmth in his eyes. Xiao Guang drew a breath, ignored Gu Yanliang, and stepped toward me. Yun Xiaoyu, come with me to see His Majesty. Tell him you've changed your mind and want to remain in the general's manor as a concubine. I'm saying this for your own good. You've already been married once. If you leave the general's manor, in the future, Gu Yanliang's cold laugh cut him off. Does General Xiao think His Majesty's decree is a child's game? The entire hall witnessed it. The decree has been issued, and the divorce document has already been entered into the records of the Imperial Clan Court. However great your military achievements may be, did you not just exchange all of them for the right to marry the princess? He tilted his head, his tone openly mocking. Do you think His Majesty will allow you to go back on your word and force Miss Yun, the very woman he just rewarded, to lower herself into concubinage? I added another pointed jab. Xiao Guang, my father is still alive. If you force the legitimate daughter of the Vice Minister of Rights to become a concubine, are you trying to make an enemy of the Yun family? Xiao Guang's expression shifted between anger and embarrassment. After a long silence, he forced out, can the Yun family support you for the rest of your life? Other than me, who would be willing to marry you? His gaze moved repeatedly between Gu Yanliang and me, and his expression grew uglier. Could the two of you have been? General Xiao should think carefully before he finishes that sentence, Gu Yuanliang said. Falsely accusing a court official is a serious offense. When Xiao Guang met my steady gaze, he finally swallowed his suspicions. Just wait, he snapped at last. Then he flung his sleeve and turned back toward the Great Hall. Only after he disappeared at the end of the corridor did Gu Yuanliang slowly come to my side. He leaned closer, lifted a loose strand of hair near my temple, and smiled. Wait until he gets back to the manor, there will be quite a show. That night, Xiao Guang did not return to the general's manor. He most likely stayed at the imperial estate, where Princess Changel was temporarily living, openly intimate with her and remaining there all night. The next morning, I stood in the courtyard holding the imperial decree, while servants carried out chest after chest of my dowry, checked each item against the inventory, and loaded everything onto carts. At some point, little Four slipped quietly to my side. Her tiny hand clutched the edge of my skirt, and when she raised her face, tears shimmered in her eyes. Her birth mother was frail and had been too weak to care for her after giving birth. From the time little Four learned to walk, she had been raised in my courtyard. When she had nightmares at night, I was the only person she wanted. Mother, don't you want little Four anymore? I'll be good from now on. I won't make trouble, and I won't secretly eat osmanthus cakes anymore. I picked her up. Her soft little arms immediately wrapped tightly around my neck, and she pleaded in a childish, coaxing voice, "Mother, please don't go." The concubines gathered around as well, one after another. Every one of them was indignant on my behalf. If Madame had not held this entire household together all these years, who knows what state the general's manor would be in by now. Yet the moment he comes home, he demands a divorce without showing Madame the slightest consideration. He has only been back a short while, and already his temper is unbearable. Does he think I enjoy waiting on him? One woman gave a dismissive snort, then coughed lightly and corrected herself. In any case, I recognize only Madame. If Madame leaves, take me with you. Without Madame here, staying in this manor would only mean suffering grievances. Another muttered, that princess truly has remarkable influence. She kept the general obsessed with her all these years. My father once escorted goods near the border. He heard the general threw tens of thousands of soldiers into the fighting just to bring the princess back. Enough. The first concubine cut her off sharply. Do not speak recklessly. Trouble comes from careless words. The others immediately fell silent and lowered their heads. Then the first concubine bowed to me. Sisters, let us congratulate our elder sister on finally escaping this bitter life. I smiled at them. I know what you're worried about. Don't be afraid. You bore children for the Xiao family, and each of you entered the household as an honored concubine, not as a servant. Even the highest power under heaven could not simply beat you or sell you off, let alone a mere princess. Stay here for now. Take care of yourselves and the children. There are still many days ahead. The 10th concubine, the youngest among them, muttered, "It's fortunate Madame was kind enough to have us registered as honored concubines and let us have children. Otherwise, how could we ever have lived so comfortably?" The 6th concubine immediately covered her mouth, while the others all glared at her. Once the last cart was loaded, I handed the thick account books and storehouse keys to the first concubine. She was the daughter of a merchant family, and had always been especially good with accounts. Working together with the second concubine, who came from a pawnshop family, and had an excellent eye for value, she was more than capable of handling the household finances. The two of them had already used 10,000 taels of silver. I secretly gave them to earn several times that amount in profit. The first concubine accepted the ledgers, and immediately separated their investment earnings from the general's manor's public funds. The second concubine calculated every monthly expense for the children's food, clothing and daily needs and wrote out a detailed list. After I had arranged everything in the manor, I prepared to leave. Before I could even step into the carriage, a sharp voice rang out like thunder. "Stop! Put everything down at once!" I turned and saw Jiang storming into the manor with Princess Changel beside him. She strode directly in front of my carriage. The red gold hairpin set with kingfisher feathers in her hair nearly shook loose as she moved. "Stop right there!" She pointed a finger at my face. "Yun Xiaoyu, you may leave, but you are not taking a single thing belonging to the Xiao family." I raised an eyebrow and signaled for my maid to bring over the dowry inventory. "Your Highness misunderstands. Even if the Xiao family owned nothing more than a single needle, I would not take it. Everything being moved here is part of the dowry my own family prepared when I married. You may inspect the list yourself." Changel snatched the document and flipped through it from beginning to end. Her expression darkened with every page. At last, she threw the list to the ground and ground her teeth. Once you married Brother Xiao, even you yourself became part of the Xiao family, much less these possessions. If you've been cast out, then you should leave everything behind, she added. That includes the rewards His Majesty gave you yesterday. You only received them because of Brother Xiao. A discarded woman like you has no right to take them away. I laughed and turned toward Xiao Guang. Does General Xiao agree? You have already divorced your first wife, yet you still want to seize her dowry. Are you not afraid of becoming a laughingstock if word spreads? Xiao Guang's gaze wavered and he avoided looking at me directly. Chang'e suffered greatly in northern D. The entire realm owes her. Leaving your dowry behind to support her is only natural. Then he added, of course, if you truly refuse, we won't force you. But if you make such a grand display of carrying your entire dowry back to your parents' home, aren't you afraid of gossip? So much for only natural. I looked Xiao Guang over again. He was young and talented, a third-rank general who pacifies the north, splendid to look at from the outside. But apart from a few inherited properties, the general's manor had almost no income. During the 5 years he spent on campaign, I had never seen a single coin of his official salary. Every expense in the manor had been covered by my dowry. And Chang'e? After the Grand Princess died, the princess's household had long since lost its former glory. It survived only on what remained of imperial favor. When Chang'e was sent into the political marriage, the emperor even reclaimed her residence. Now she had nowhere to stay except an imperial estate. The emperor had rewarded her generously for her service, but most imperial gifts could only be displayed on an altar and admired. They could neither be sold nor pawned. To put it plainly, those two devoted lovebirds were so poor they were nearly plucked bare. So the moment they heard I was moving my dowry out of the general's manor, neither of them could sit still. One desperately wanted my silver to keep up appearances. The other could not bear to lose me, the money tree that kept producing silver. What a perfectly harmonious pair they made. I adjusted the jade hairpin on my head and spared them no dignity. The realm owes the princess? I have already given her my husband. As far as I am concerned, that settles the account between us. If your highness still believes it is not enough, then go to the palace and ask His Majesty. If there is an imperial decree ordering me to leave anything behind, I will obey without a word. Chang'e's face showed unwillingness, but calculations still flickered in her eyes. Brother Xiao was mine from the beginning. If you had not taken advantage of our quarrel and forced yourself between us with all your schemes, how could we have been separated? This is all because of you. Everything is your fault. I knew there was no point trying to wake someone who had chosen to pretend she was asleep. So I simply waved toward the people behind me. Everyone, come here, meet your father. The first concubine, who had been standing neatly to one side, immediately led the other 9 women and 11 children of varying heights forward in a rush. All of them had been conceived before Xiao Guang left for war, so naturally they were close in age. 2 were a little smaller than the rest because they had remained in their mother's wombs for 13 months before birth and had grown more slowly. Xiao Guang went completely rigid. His eyes widened as they moved from the 10 graceful concubines to the children, who tilted their heads and stared at him with innocent curiosity. Princess Chang'e's face turned white. She spun toward Xiao Guang and shrieked, "Who are they? Didn't you tell me that all these years, I was the only woman in your heart, and that you never shared a marriage bed with Yun Xiayue? Then where did all these children come from?" I lowered my eyes to the children with a gentle smile. "This is your father. Go on, call him father." Little Four looked up at me first. Then she took half a step forward and said in her childish voice, "Father." The other children followed, "Father, father, father." Their clear voices echoed across the courtyard until the words seemed to come from every direction. Xiao Guang staggered. Shock and disbelief filled his face. "Impossible, how can this be? I was only with each of them once." I nodded helpfully. "Your Highness, don't be angry. General Xiao is not lying, it truly was only once with each woman." Xiao Guang glared at me, then seized Chang'e, who looked ready to explode, and hurried to explain. "It was Yun Xiayue. She persuaded the clan elders that I might not return alive from the campaign and insisted that I had to leave heirs for the Xiao family. They drugged me. I did not do it willingly." But Chang'e had no interest in his explanation. She had always been domineering, and 5 years of resentment from Northern Dai had left her with nowhere to vent it. Old anger and new humiliation erupted together, and she slapped him across the face. "You lied to me, you wretch!" Xiao Guang clutched his cheek, his chest heaving, but before he could answer, several concubines covered their faces with handkerchiefs and began to sob. Each sounded more aggrieved than the last, making Changle's anger look even harsher by comparison. "General, are you all right? Were you hurt? The princess may be noble, but she still cannot strike people whenever she pleases. General, you defeated Northern Dai and brought the princess home. How can she repay kindness with hostility? General, do you still remember me? We sisters waited 5 full years for you. We watched every day and hoped every night, and only now have you finally come home." Before the women had finished crying, the children saw their mothers in tears and burst into sobs as well. They rushed forward all at once. One grabbed Xiao Guang's sleeve, another hugged his leg, and another clung to his belt. "Father, does it hurt? Little Four will blow on it for you." "Don't hit Father, you're a bad person." "Father, eat Little Seven's osmanthus cake. You'll feel better after you eat it." "Father, I'm Little Nine." "Father!" The courtyard dissolved into chaos. Calls, crying, and shouts mixed together until it was noisier than a chicken yard. Xiao Guang was surrounded by hands large and small. He could hardly move. His robe was pulled crooked, and his official hat nearly fell off. At last he could bear no more. "Enough! All of you, shut up!" The courtyard fell silent for a heartbeat. The concubines immediately stopped, but the children had been startled by his shout. Little Four was the first to burst into tears. "Father is scary!" Then all 11 children began crying at once, several of them at the top of their lungs. Princess Changle could not endure the noise. She covered her ears and fled the general's manor. Xiao Guang struggled to pry the children's hands away from him, then staggered after her. Only when both of them had vanished did I calmly wave my hand. The children stopped crying at once. 2 of them could not stop quickly enough, and accidentally hiccuped. Little Four wiped her face with her chubby hand. Her eyes curved like tiny crescent moons as she hugged my arm. "Mother, did Little Four do well?" I gently stroked her head, then spoke seriously to the first concubine. "From now on, if the princess or the general makes things difficult for you, don't fight them head-on. Go to the manor gate and cry. You don't need to argue or make a huge scene. Just let the neighbors see your tears." The women immediately understood. They covered their mouths as they laughed, all thinking the same thing. The first concubine quickly helped me to the carriage and lifted the curtain. "Madam, don't worry. With us here, no one will be able to trouble you." As she spoke, she winked meaningfully toward the inside of the carriage, a playful smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. I followed her gaze and saw Gu Yuanliang leaning leisurely against the carriage wall, a book resting on his knee as though he were reading with deep concentration. The only problem was that the book appeared to be upside down. I glared at the first concubine. She truly had no fear at all. How had she dared to let him into my carriage? If Xiao Guang discovered it, she calmly lowered the curtain and told the driver to set off immediately. The carriage darkened slightly. Neither Gu Yuanliang nor I spoke. In truth, if Xiao Guang had not interfered years earlier, the man I should have married was the one sitting across from me now. At the time, the marriage documents had already been prepared. Even Gu Yuanliang's paired fish jade token had been delivered to my courtyard. But just before our 2 families were to exchange the formal betrothal documents, Xiao Guang arrived at the Yun residence with gifts and asked for my hand. The Gu family's documents and jade token were returned untouched. Later, I heard that Gu Yuanliang sat silently in his courtyard for an entire night. The next morning, he went to his office as usual and handled 3 cases in a row, issuing quick and decisive judgments. His colleagues only thought Deputy Minister Gu was unusually decisive that day. No one knew why his eyes were bloodshot. Later, Madame Gu arranged meetings with prospective brides for him. He answered only, "Your son prefers men." Madame Gu nearly fainted. She immediately ordered the matter kept quiet and told outsiders only that her son was devoted to serving His Majesty and had no interest in romance. 3 years into my lonely marriage, news came that General Xiao had supposedly died, and that his coffin was being brought back to the capital from the north. I was overjoyed. I dragged the first concubine to Zuxian Tavern, rented a private room and drank 2 jars of wine. When I woke, the sun was already slanting toward the west. I was still dazed when I realized Gu Yuanliang was lying beside me, his clothes in disarray. He pulled the front of his robe closed, his eyes red-rimmed. His outer robe had slipped halfway down, revealing several faint scratch marks on his shoulder. He choked out, "I bled, you have to take responsibility." I stared at him, baffled. I was clearly the one who had bled. From that day on, he refused to leave me alone. Now in the carriage, his cool fingers lightly wound around a strand of hair by my ear. Xiao Guang's reckless advance cost 20,000 soldiers their lives. I have spent an entire year investigating it, All the evidence is in my hands. He paused. Madam, surely you don't want your husband stripped of office, do you? I gave him a hard swat on the head. We are already divorced. What husband? He immediately held his head, then leaned toward me with exaggerated grievance. I meant me. He lifted his head, leaned close, and left a faint bite mark on my neck before finally letting go. His tone turned serious again. I have the evidence, so of course I will not let Xiao Guang escape responsibility. But right now, he has just returned after claiming a great victory over Northern Dai, and has brought the princess back. His Majesty feels as though his old blade is still sharp, and that his achievements in both civil and military affairs are worthy of the history books. This is the moment when the Emperor is most pleased with himself. If I accuse Xiao Guang right now, then whether His Majesty punishes him or not, the accusation itself will become a thorn in the Emperor's heart. As he said this, his aggrieved look deepened and he turned the blame back on me. After taking advantage of me that night and ruining my supposed innocence, you have never once treated me as your husband. My raised hand hovered in midair for a moment before I could only press it to my forehead. Was this shameless fox truly the same deputy minister of the Court of Judicial Review, whom everyone praised as stern, impartial, and brilliant at solving cases? Had someone possessed his body? Feeling slightly guilty, I turned my face away. The truth was, I had never planned to remarry. The Gu family was an old scholarly household with a strict reputation. Their elders valued ritual and propriety above almost everything. How could they accept a divorced woman like me? Even if they reluctantly allowed the marriage, I could imagine the daily scrutiny, the looks from sisters-in-law, the displeasure of a mother-in-law, and the whispering of outsiders. Just thinking about it felt suffocating. Living freely on my own sounded much better. Yet when I looked into Gu Yuanliang's eyes, the refusal already on my tongue would not come out, so I sighed and changed the subject. The whole country is celebrating victory right now. Even if you present your evidence, His Majesty will probably punish Xiao Guang lightly, or suppress the entire matter as though it never happened. Those 20,000 soldiers cannot have died for nothing. Wait a little longer. There will be a chance. Gu Yuanliang was silent for a moment. The playful shamelessness gradually left his face, replaced by sharp calm in his eyes. He nodded, tapped the carriage wall, and called to the driver. Go to the estate outside the city. I glared at him. Gu Yuanliang, are you planning to hide me away as your kept woman? My divorce had already become the talk of the capital. I did not want to drag my parents' household into the scandal, so I truly had no intention of returning to the Yun residence. But that did not mean I could move into his estate. Gu Yuanliang looked even more offended than I did. His lips trembled and the tips of his ears turned visibly red. I mean your estate. Yours, yours, yours. He ground out each word through clenched teeth, looking as though he wanted to swallow me whole. Fine. Let me be your kept man instead. Are you satisfied now? Not long after I settled at my estate outside the city, I heard that the general's manor had descended into chaos. No one knew how Xiao Guang managed to pacify Chang'e, but the two soon became inseparable again. The very next day, Chang'e had her entire dowry carried into the general's manor, with great pomp and ceremony. The first concubine wrote to me that Chang'e's procession looked impressive at first glance. Chests filled the courtyard, but in reality each chest contained only 1 or 2 items. The servants seemed almost superhuman, because each man could carry 3 chests at once. As soon as the dowry was moved inside, Chang'e summoned all 10 concubines to the main courtyard. Under the blazing sun, she sat in a grand armchair and looked down at them one by one. Her gaze finally stopped on the first concubine, who was holding the household seal and account books. Now that I have entered this household, you should have brought those things to me immediately, instead of waiting for me to demand them. You do not understand even the simplest rules. Someone like you thinks she is worthy of managing the general's manor accounts? Go kneel in the ancestral hall. You are not to rise without my permission. Xiao Guang stood beside Chang'e in support and nodded. Do as the princess says. Before the first concubine could answer, the 5th concubine, who loved chiming in more than anyone, covered her mouth and laughed. When the former madam was here, the entire general's manor was managed by the first concubine. Why would she suddenly be unqualified? Your Highness is certainly impatient. There are still 3 months before the formal wedding, yet you are already acting like the mistress of the household. Chang'e whipped her head around, a dangerous, murderous glint flashing in her eyes. A mere concubine dares mock me? Someone, take her away and sell her. The 5th concubine remained where she was, completely unafraid. When I entered this manor, I was registered as an honored concubine, not a bondservant. The clan rules and ritual law are very clear. Even the general has no right to sell me. Your Highness should give up that idea. Changle clenched her fists and forced herself to remain calm. Then she pointed at the others. What about them? Are all of them honored concubines too? If I cannot sell you, then I will sell the rest. All of you listen carefully. If anyone suffers today, it will be because she angered me. Such blatant attempts to divide them earned only a few cold laughs. The 8th concubine coughed softly and spoke in a gentle voice. The former madam treated us like her own sisters. She even felt that being only honored concubines still did us an injustice. The other women nodded together. Neither Changle nor Xiao Guang believed her. They immediately ordered servants to bring out all 10 concubine contracts and inspected them one by one. The terms were there in black and white, and each document bore the clan elders' seals. Every woman had been formally registered as an honored concubine. Changle ground her teeth. She had clearly planned to find an excuse to drive all 10 women away that very day, but she had not expected that she could not even sell them. She hurled one of the contracts at Xiao Guang, turned and ran into the inner rooms, slamming the door behind her. Xiao Guang rushed after her and pounded on the door. Changle, listen to me. I'll make all of them leave immediately. I won't keep a single one. The 5th concubine called helpfully from behind him. General, our clan rules are written very clearly. A freeborn concubine who has borne a child cannot simply be expelled from the household. Xiao Guang exploded. I am the master of this manor. If I tell you to get out, every one of you will get out. Anyone who says another word will be dragged outside immediately. He immediately ordered the manor's strongest servants to throw all the concubines' belongings outside the gates. Only then did Changle slowly open the door. Leaning against the frame with her chin raised, she looked openly triumphant. The 1st and 2nd concubines exchanged glances, smiled and lightly clapped their hands. At once the children came running from different corners of the manor. They rushed straight toward Xiao Guang and began crying at full volume. Father, don't send my birth mother away. Little 4 cannot live without her. Father, little 7 won't eat osmanthus cakes anymore. I'll give all my cakes to you. Please let my birth mother stay. Little 3, the tallest child, also had the loudest voice. You came home and drove mother away. Now you want to drive our birth mothers away too. What kind of father are you? We don't want a father like you. 11 children cried so loudly that the whole courtyard seemed to shake. Xiao Guang shouted at them several times to be quiet, but it had no effect. Furious and overwhelmed, he raised his hand to strike little 3, the tallest child and the one crying the loudest. Xiao Guang, don't you dare! Before he could touch the child, several clan elders hurried in with dark expressions. More than 10 younger men of the clan followed behind them, all clearly angry. They had all received help from me at one time or another, and had already been displeased that Xiao Guang had forced the divorce. The old clan chief struck his cane heavily against the ground. We had no right to stop you from divorcing Lady Yun. She was your wife, so whether you kept the marriage or ended it was ultimately your decision. But these children are blood of the Xiao clan. Anyone who harms them makes an enemy of the entire clan. Not even the princess may do so. Xiao Guang slowly lowered his hand. Changle grabbed his sleeve and shook it desperately. Brother Xiao, say something. Are you just going to stand there while they bully me? But Xiao Guang lowered his head and said nothing. Instead, the old clan chief looked at Changle with a grave expression. Your Highness, this is an internal matter of the Xiao family. If you wish to manage the inner household, then first you must have the proper status to do so. Xiao Guang's parents had died when he was young, and it was the old clan chief who had protected him as he grew up. Moreover, the current emperor placed great importance on clan order and ritual law. The words of the Xiao elders carried real weight. No matter how angry Xiao Guang was, he did not dare humiliate the old clan chief openly. He gritted his teeth, took Changle by the hand, and pulled her back into the inner rooms. The two talked for the entire night. The next morning, Xiao Guang sat in the main hall in high spirits and ordered all the children brought to the main courtyard. If they are my children, then from today onward, every one of them, boy or girl, will learn martial arts. His plan was obvious. He intended to put the children through punishing daily martial arts training until they were sore and injured, certain their mothers would panic and come begging him to stop. He even thought coldly that if a few children did not survive the training, it would not matter. After all, each concubine had conceived after only one encounter with him, which he took as proof of his exceptional vigor. Changle was still young and healthy, so he was certain she could bear him a legitimate son. The more he thought about it, the more pleased he became. But he waited, and no one arrived. Half an hour later, a servant finally ran back, panting. General, the concubines took all the children to the estate outside the city early this morning. They said they do not know when they will return. Xiao Guang and Chang'e were both furious that their plan had failed. Still, all the people they found irritating were gone, and the enormous general's manor now belonged only to the two of them. They soon decided that this was exactly what they wanted. Chang'e even arranged a drinking party in the garden and sat with Xiao Guang, laughing that they finally had peace and quiet. That peace did not last even 3 days. Rumors swept through the capital like a storm. In tea houses and taverns, people who had previously been discussing the victory over Northern Dai now talked instead about how Princess Chang'e had barely entered the general's manor before trying to punish and sell the concubines, and how even the Xiao family's own children had been driven away to an estate outside the city. Look at that. The very next day, all the children were sent away. Who knows when they will return, or even whether they are alive? How pitiful. The princess is far too cruel. When Lady Yun was there, every one of those children was healthy and well-fed. One of them called me auntie last time, as adorable as a child in a New Year painting. I thought a princess who had suffered in a political marriage would understand hardship better than anyone. Who would have expected her to be unable to tolerate even a few concubines and children? Lady Yun was the truly virtuous one. She lived alone for 5 years and still raised 11 children for the Xiao family. Without her, the general's manor will decline sooner or later. General Xiao will regret this one day. Just wait. When those words reached Chang'e, she was so angry that she smashed 3 teacups and a diamond-patterned mirror. Grinding her teeth, she said, "They dare look down on me. They dare compare me with a divorced woman. I will prove that I can do better than she ever did." To repair her reputation and establish herself again in the capital, Chang'e began hosting one lavish gathering after another. There were flower viewing banquets, poetry gatherings, and elegant salons. Invitations went out every 3 days to noble households across the capital. She wanted everyone not only to attend, but to see with their own eyes that Princess Chang'e was 100 times better than Yun Xiaoyue. Several noble ladies who disliked Chang'e deliberately came to persuade me to attend. "If you keep avoiding her gatherings, won't she look down on you?" I only smiled and shook my head. Conditions at the estate outside the city are quite rough. The children have stayed there only a short while, and every one of them has already grown noticeably thinner. Lately, I have been busy preparing nourishing soups for them. How could I have time for banquets? After all, they had once called me mother. I could not simply stand by while they suffered unfair treatment. The noble ladies praised my kindness endlessly. 2 were even moved to tears. After everyone left, the smile at the corner of my mouth slowly faded. I looked toward the bamboo curtain and asked calmly, "Have they caught the old woman who poisoned the estate well?" The first concubine stepped out from behind the curtain and nodded. The Court of Judicial Review put her under harsh interrogation. Unable to hold out, she confessed that the princess ordered it and that the general quietly approved. But when the report was submitted to His Majesty, he suppressed the matter. She gritted her teeth in bitter anger. The chopsticks in my hand bent slightly under my fingers. I truly had not expected Xiao Guang to become cruel enough to endanger even children. "His Majesty may suppress it once," I said. "But can he suppress everything forever?" The first concubine understood at once. She bowed and withdrew. Chang'e's 4th flower-viewing banquet of the month soon arrived. Carriages lined the road outside the general's manor, and noblewomen from prominent families were led into the garden. Chang'e wore a newly made peacock blue brocade outer robe. Moving among the guests, she finally looked somewhat like the mistress of a distinguished household. But halfway through the banquet, a commotion suddenly broke out in the front courtyard. Guests stopped walking. Even the music fell silent. "What is happening outside?" Chang'e demanded. "Who is bold enough to cause trouble at the general's manor?" A servant returned from the gate, wiping sweat from his forehead, and stammered out his report. "Your Highness, many people are outside holding debt notes. They are demanding payment for wine, peonies, and banquet expenses." Chang'e's face turned white and she stumbled back 2 steps. When I left the manor, I had taken my entire dowry with me. When the concubines moved to the country estate, they had taken nearly all the liquid silver recorded in the household accounts, officially for the children's daily expenses. By the time Chang'e realized something was wrong, the storerooms held little beyond imperial gifts that could not be sold and a few scraps of silver. But the invitations had already been sent, and the banquets could not simply be cancelled. She had no choice but to grit her teeth, keep them going on borrowed money, and watch the debts pile higher every day. She could deal with the accounts later. What she absolutely could not allow was for the guests to learn the truth now. "Someone, drive those troublemakers away," They are spreading lies and damaging the reputation of the general's manor. Then she turned back to the women in the garden and forced a stiff smile. It's only a misunderstanding. They must have come to the wrong residence. My mother, who had come specifically to enjoy the spectacle, waved her round fan and sighed. When my Xiaoyue was still here, when did the general's manor ever suffer this sort of misunderstanding? The ladies around her exchanged glances and hid their laughter behind their sleeves. Changle's face shifted between red and white, but she did not dare lose her temper in front of them. Xiao Guang had been receiving fellow officials in the front hall. Hearing the disturbance, he strode out. At first glance, he assumed the creditors had deliberately come to extort money from him. For days, his colleagues had mocked him over the rumors. He was already full of anger, and now he lost control. He seized one of the merchants and struck him repeatedly. The man was left with a bleeding forehead and a broken arm. He cried out and tumbled down the steps. When the others rushed forward demanding an explanation, Xiao Guang lashed out at several more and left them injured as well. The creditors did scatter. But merchants willing to come openly to the general's manor to collect debts naturally had powerful connections of their own. The general's manor became the laughingstock of the capital, while memorials accusing Xiao Guang poured into the imperial study like snowflakes. Some accused him of condoning Changle's violence in the household. Others accused him of mistreating the children of his concubines. Still others accused him of abusing his military status and publicly injuring innocent citizens. Those whose interests had been harmed were especially loud. A debt must be repaid. That is basic justice. During the next grand court session, the emperor, mindful of Zhuang's military service, intended to suppress the scandal again and quietly settle matters. But he had barely gotten out the words, "My dear Minister Xiao," when two guards helped a trembling courier into the great hall. "Your Majesty, the Northern D army has advanced south. 3 cities have already fallen, and their forces are moving directly toward Yanmen Pass." The emperor's expression changed sharply. Even the hand holding the urgent report trembled. He abruptly raised his head and stared at Xiao Guang, who was kneeling in the hall. His voice was so low and cold that it seemed to rise from an abyss. "Xiao Guang, you personally told me that Northern D had suffered a crushing defeat, that its strength was badly damaged, and that it would be unable to march south again for 10 years. Then what is this?" Xiao Guang's shoulders hunched. Cold sweat covered him. The truth was that he had exaggerated his achievements. He had turned a costly victory into a claimed crushing triumph, reporting that the enemy force had been wiped out, and pretending that Northern Daho's core strength remained intact, would need 10 years to recover. He had assumed Northern Dai would at least need 3 to 5 years to regroup. By then, his fame would be secure and no one would bother investigating the details of the campaign. He had never expected them to return so quickly, much less to attack even more fiercely than before. "Your Majesty, forgive me, I truly did win. It's only in the past many officials would probably have spoken for Xiao Guang. But he had offended too many people. Court families were linked by a dense web of marriages, yet not one person stepped forward to defend him." The great hall fell completely silent. Gu Yuanliang coughed lightly and walked calmly toward the throne. He raised a thick case file with both hands, his expression cold. "Your Majesty, the Court of Judicial Review has spent a full year investigating this matter. I now have conclusive evidence and ask that Your Majesty examine it. During the campaign against Northern D, Xiao Guang pursued military glory recklessly and ignored orders. He used 20,000 soldiers as bait in exchange for what he called a victory, the capture of a single city. The casualty lists, drafts of the military reports, and jointly signed blood petitions of the surviving captains are all in this file. Every line can be verified. I ask Your Majesty to investigate carefully." A palace eunuch respectfully placed the case file on the imperial desk. The emperor read several pages. His expression grew darker with each one, and his gaze, sharp as a blade, fixed on Xiao Guang. "Excellent. What a magnificent great victory, General Xiao. What do you have to say for yourself?" Xiao Guang prostrated himself, striking his forehead heavily against the jade floor. "Your Majesty, I know I am guilty. I am willing to redeem myself through service. Let me lead troops north immediately and redeem my offense through military merit. I beg Your Majesty to give me one chance." He did not dare defend himself further. He could only hope that he was still useful enough to be spared. The emperor turned the jade ring on his thumb and remained silent for a long time. Soon the entire hall erupted into argument. Some officials condemned Xiao Guang for treating soldiers' lives as expendable. Others mourned the men who had died. Still others argued that replacing a commander immediately before a major battle was dangerous, so it might be better to let him redeem himself through military service. Before either side could prevail, another urgent message arrived from outside the hall. The new ruler of Northern Dai had sent an envoy to the capital, and the envoy was already waiting outside the palace gates. The emperor's face darkened and he ordered the envoy admitted. The envoy wore Northern Dai furs and spoke the language of the Central Plains stiffly, but his manner was neither servile nor arrogant. After bowing, he went directly to the point. Our new king inherited the throne from his elder brother. Under the old customs of Northern Dai, when an elder brother dies, his younger brother succeeds him and inherits what belonged to the former king, including the royal consort. The entire Great Hall erupted in shock. Not long afterward, palace attendants led Princess Changle into the hall. She had changed into plain, elegant clothes. Her face was pale, almost as it had been when she first returned to the capital. The emperor asked whether she was willing to return to Northern Dai. She shook her head hoarsely, tears streaming down her face, and declared that she would never return under any circumstances. She said she had already suffered enough there and would accept any consequence rather than set foot on that land again. The envoy took out a pair of small faded silver bracelets and respectfully presented them. Your Highness, you bore 2 children for our king. They can already walk and call for their mother. Do you intend to abandon them as well? Xiao Guang suddenly raised his head and stared at Changle with red-rimmed eyes. You lied to me. Didn't you tell me that in Northern Dai you would rather die than yield? That you had remained faithful, only because you were waiting for me to bring you home? Changle stopped crying. A strange laugh escaped her throat. Wait for you? If I hadn't schemed, who knows how long that old man would have lived? Everything happened because you were useless. If you had not made me so angry that I ended up being sent into that political marriage, would I have suffered there for 5 years? And what about you? You lived comfortably, you married, had children, and even filled your household with 10 concubines. Did you ever once think about how I lived? Xiao Guang refused to accept it. I fought for 5 years because of you. Why don't you ask how many times I nearly died or whether I was ever wounded? No one had expected the 2 of them to begin fighting in the middle of the imperial hall. Gu Yuanliang gave a cold laugh from the side. Princess Changle and General Xiao truly are devoted to one another, but the envoy just said the 2 children belong to the new king. Does that not mean the princess had already been secretly involved with the new king? It seems her life in Northern Dai may not have been exactly as we were told. The emperor did not immediately agree to send Changle back. Instead, he ordered Xiao Guang to muster troops and march north at once. Xiao Guang bowed deeply to accept the decree, then staggered out of the hall. By the time he returned from the military camp to the general's manor, dusk was approaching. Changle was waiting for him in the main hall. He looked at her face, still as beautiful as ever, and suddenly felt a deep sense of revulsion. His stomach was empty and his throat was parched as if burning. He glanced at the tea on the table but did not touch it. Instead, he ordered a servant to make a fresh pot. After drinking 3 cups, he hurled the empty cup toward Changle. You shameless, unfaithful woman. You deceived me so cruelly. Changle refused to back down. She grabbed the teapot and threw it back. I deceived you? Xiao Guang, do you dare say none of this is your fault? She kicked aside a shard on the floor and brushed water from her skirt. You were never wholehearted. You always wanted the best of both worlds. Did you think I didn't know? Long ago, you began looking down on me because my mother had died and I had no strong family backing. You thought Yun Xiayue came from a better household, had a better reputation, and was more suitable to be the wife of a general. At that spring hunt, you deliberately provoked me into acting against Yun Xiayue. You wanted a chance to play the hero, rescue her, get physically close to her, and then use the favor of saving her life as an excuse to propose openly. Xiao Guang swayed and turned his face away guiltily. You're talking nonsense. I never. Changle cut him off with a cold laugh. Of course you did. I admit I had a bad temper and was foolish enough to fall into your trap. But why should I have been sent to a foreign land and endured years of humiliation while you remained safely in the capital, married, had children, and enjoyed honor and wealth? She slowly walked toward him, her gaze poisonous. So I deliberately made up a lie. I told you Yun Xiayue had schemed to separate us. I told you her father was the one who recommended me for the political marriage. You understand my weaknesses, and I understand yours. You are gullible and easily swayed by what other people tell you. Look how quickly you believed me. You felt guilty toward me and treated her with nothing but coldness and cruelty. Xiao Guang, that is all you amount to. Xiao Guang struck her across the face, making her stumble back. He paced the room like a trapped beast. I had the most virtuous and generous wife in the world. She arranged 10 concubines for the family and raised all those children. You ruined everything. Changle held her cheek and laughed wildly. Ruined you? Then let me show you what it truly means to ruin you. Before Xiaoguang understood what she meant, severe pain seized his stomach. He doubled over and coughed up dark blood. Changle took out a handkerchief and carefully wiped the corner of his mouth. Did you think you would be safe simply because you refused the tea that was already on the table? Xiaoguang stared at her in disbelief. Are you mad? Without me, His Majesty will send you back to Northern Dai. Changle only shrugged. Then I'll go back. My late husband's younger brother is much better than that old king was. He is young and strong, is fairly gentle with me, and we have 2 children together. As for you, do you really think His Majesty will show mercy to a commander who can no longer lead an army? When news reached the palace that Xiaoguang had been poisoned and that his limbs had gone weak, leaving him unable to campaign, the emperor was furious. He immediately changed his plan and allowed the Northern Dai envoy to escort Changle back to the new king. You and Xiaoguang never completed a formal wedding, the emperor told her. You cannot be considered husband and wife, so sending you back will not be breaking up a lawful marriage. Changle's poison did not kill Xiaoguang, but the emperor's punishment still hung over him like a sharp blade. He remained bedridden in the general's manor for half a month. One day, while his mind was still clouded from illness, cheerful voices suddenly sounded in the courtyard. The door creaked open and the first concubine entered with a bright smile. General, today is a very happy day. Xiaoguang's dull eyes suddenly lit up. Has Yun Xiaoyue come back? I knew it. She is so generous and kind. If she knows what has happened to me, she will certainly return. He struggled to sit up and look toward the doorway, searching for a familiar figure. The first concubine rolled her eyes in open contempt. Miss Yun is indeed celebrating today. She is getting married to Deputy Minister Gu Yuanliang of the Court of Judicial Review. We are all in a hurry to attend the wedding banquet, so we came especially to inform the general before we left. The hope in Xiaoguang's eyes turned instantly to fury. He collapsed back against the bed and pounded the bed frame. I knew it! Those 2 must have been involved long ago. Gu Yuanliang never looked at her innocently. They deserved the punishment reserved for adulterers. The first concubine frowned. She did not want to hear another word of it. In one swift motion, she took out a cloth and stuffed it into his mouth to silence him, then called toward the door. The other 9 concubines filed in one after another and stood in a row beside the bed. When everyone was present, each woman stepped forward and slapped Xiaoguang once on each cheek, 20 slaps in all. When Madame was here, she was the one who rescued me from misery and gave me a way to live. How dare you insult her? You deserve this. Another said, when I nearly died giving birth to my 4th child, Madame asked her own family to bring an imperial physician. She stayed beside me for 3 days and nights without sleeping. She saved my life. A third declared, Madame's kindness to us is heavier than a mountain. I swore long ago that anyone who tried to destroy her peaceful life would pay dearly for it. By the time all 10 women were finished, Xiaoguang's face was swollen and he could only make muffled sounds through the cloth. His eyes were red and wet with humiliation and fury, and he looked utterly desperate. At that moment, a shrill palace voice sounded from outside the courtyard. An imperial decree has arrived. Xiaoguang received the decree. The decree was perfectly clear. Because Xiaoguang had pursued military glory recklessly and caused the deaths of 20,000 soldiers, his crime could not be ignored. In consideration of his years of campaigning and his previous service, the emperor chose a reduced sentence. Xiaoguang was stripped of every official rank and exiled permanently to the northwest, never to be recalled. Tears ran down Xiaoguang's face as he lay prostrate on the floor in utter defeat. The concubines acted as though they did not see him. Each picked up the wedding gift she had prepared, chatting and laughing as they headed for the door. All of you, stop! Xiaoguang struggled upright, clutching the imperial decree. You are my concubines. If I am exiled to the northwest, none of you is allowed to run away. Not only you, your children must come with me too. The humiliation he had just suffered seemed to find an outlet at last. He laughed wildly and ranted that if he had to suffer in the northwest, none of them would be allowed a peaceful life either. The women stopped, looked at one another and burst out laughing. As their laughter continued, the corners of Xiaoguang's mouth slowly drooped. His confidence vanished, and unease spread across his face. When they had laughed enough, the first concubine took out a release document and waved it in front of him. This was signed by your own hand 5 years ago. She pointed to the final line. Not only do we no longer have any relationship with the general's manor, but the children we bore were also removed from the Xiao family genealogy under the terms you signed. With help, Xiao Guang took the document and read it again and again. At last he threw back his head and cried out, Yunxia you schemed against me. He coughed up blood and lost consciousness. I learned all of that only later. At the time, I was performing the wedding rites with Gu Yuanliang. I wore deep red bridal robes, and golden mandarin ducks embroidered on my red veil shimmered in the candlelight. After the ceremonies were complete, I was escorted to the bridal chamber. Gu Yuanliang came in carrying the scent of wine. He staggered toward the bed and carefully lifted my veil. As the red silk slipped away, his eyes shone as brightly as if they held an entire sky of stars. He wrapped his arms around me. At last I married you. The next morning, when I went to serve tea to my new mother-in-law, I expected to be tested or criticized. Instead, Madame Gu was even more nervous than I was. She held my hand tightly as though afraid I might run away, even her lips trembled. Good daughter-in-law, thank goodness you came, thank goodness. That son of mine nearly insisted on bringing a man home as his spouse. I stared at Gu Yuanliang in astonishment. I had not realized he had gone that far because of me. Later, when no one else was around, he rested his chin against my shoulder and complained in an aggrieved voice. For you, your husband pretended for 3 years that he preferred men. You are never allowed to abandon me now. I stroked his head and gave him a light kiss on the chin. A year later, in the middle of summer, I was pregnant and staying at the country estate to escape the heat. Little Four crouched beside my stone chair and carefully peeled a purple grape. She held it to my mouth and warned me in a serious little voice, Mother, eat slowly. There is a seed, so remember to spit it out. I opened my mouth and accepted the grape. Before I could swallow it, Little Seven ran over, holding a round fan. Mother, Little Seven will fan you. The other children ran all over the courtyard, chasing dragonflies and setting crickets against one another. The first concubine sat on a low stool and read out the month's income from the shops. The fourth concubine carefully massaged my slightly swollen legs. The second concubine brought me a bowl of warm cow's milk and refused to leave until she saw me finish it. The fifth concubine opened a letter and curled her lip. There is civil war in northern Dai. The princess has remarried again. Oh? That man in the north lasted a whole year before dying. I suppose that counts for something, someone remarked. The third concubine immediately snatched the letter away and tore it into pieces. Why read such unpleasant rubbish? Don't spoil Madame's mood. Gu Yuanliang stood more than 20 feet away, looking strangely left out. His face darkened as he approached carrying a bowl of bird's nest soup. She is my wife. Would all of you please make a little room? The concubines laughed and led the children away. Gu Yuanliang wrapped my hand in his. The setting sun slanted through the treetops, bathing the courtyard in warm gold. At some point the sound of music rose again. A cheerful melody blended with the children's laughter and drifted far away on the evening breeze. Thank you for supporting Panda. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring you more amazing stories. Now, let's begin story 2. I was reborn to a time before my elder sister was found and brought home. This time I set out 3 days early. When I opened my eyes, rain was falling outside. Raindrops struck the blue-gray roof tiles, each tap more urgent than the last. Qingxin lifted the curtain and came in carrying freshly brewed medicines. Seeing me sit up, she hurried over. Miss, why are you awake? You stayed up all night again because of news about the eldest, miss. The physician just said, what day is it today? My voice was terribly hoarse. Qingxin froze. The 2nd day of the 3rd month. My fingers clenched around the quilt. The 2nd day of the 3rd month. The 2nd day of the 3rd month in the year I was 15. It was also 3 days before my elder sister was found and brought back to the Yongning Marquis household in my previous life. I stared at the gray-white sky beyond the window, and the sound of another rainstorm suddenly echoed in my ears. On the 5th day of the 3rd month that year, a violent storm had battered the capital all night. The Shen family found a girl in a ruined temple, covered from head to toe in mud and grime. She was so thin she seemed to be nothing but bones, and around her wrist was the silver bell bracelet mother had made with her own hands. When she saw me, she could not even speak a complete sentence. I had knelt in the mud and pulled her into my arms. Elder sister, I'm Wei. Her body had been burning with fever. She stared at me for a long time before she finally seemed to recognize me. She called me little sister. 7 days later, she died in my arms. By then she was so wasted that she no longer looked like a 16-year-old girl. I held her and kept calling for the physicians, for father, for my brother. I even prayed to the Bodhisattva. I was willing to trade anything if only she could live. No one could save her. The poisoning was too severe. The physician said she had been ingesting poison continuously for more than 10 days, and the final dose had severely damaged her heart. Even Huatuo himself could not have saved her. Less than half a month after my sister died, grandmother coughed up blood. Another month later, my elder brother fell from his horse and was gravely injured. By the end of summer, father was accused of secretly colluding with an enemy state on the northwestern frontier. On the day the Yongning Marca household was confiscated, I stood among broken porcelain and blood, and finally understood that some disasters never descended without warning. It was only that when the first blade fell, we had failed to see it. My sister's death had been that first blade. Miss? Qingxin's voice pulled me back. I suddenly threw off the quilt. Prepare the horses. What horses? The horses. I did not even put my shoes on properly before getting out of bed. Qingxin chased after me in panic. It's raining so hard, where are you going? South City. When my sister was found in my previous life, she had smelled not only of mud and rainwater but also of a faint bitter medicinal odor. Black ash had clung to the soles of her shoes. There had been no pharmacy and no charcoal kiln near the ruined temple. Later, the old woman who had bathed her told us that a short length of thin hemp rope, already blackened, had been wound around her ankle. No one had thought much of it then. Only many years later, shortly before my own death, did I hear by chance that the rear courtyard of an abandoned Jisheng pharmacy in South City had once been rented by a group of people of unknown origin during the spring of that very year. In my last life, I learned it too late. This time, I would not. I rushed into the front courtyard and nearly collided with my elder brother, Shen Xingzhou. He was still dressed in the close-fitting clothes he wore for martial training. He frowned. Where are you going? To find elder sister. His expression changed at once. 8 years earlier, during the Lantern Festival, my sister had been swept away in the crowd. The Shen family had searched for her for 8 whole years. Father had sent out nearly everyone he could spare, and no one wanted her found more desperately than my brother. You have news? No. Then why are you acting crazy? I looked up at him. Brother, trust me once. Something in my eyes must have startled him. After a long moment he muttered, You really are impossible, then turned and shouted for horses. We took only 6 household guards. Jisheng Pharmacy in South City had been abandoned for years. A thick layer of dust covered the lock on its door. My brother dismounted, glanced at it, and said, No one has been here. But I was staring at the threshold. The rain was pouring down, yet there was a fresh muddy footprint on the inside edge. Someone is here. My voice trembled. My brother's face darkened. He kicked the door. The first kick did not open it. On the second, the wooden door crashed inward with a bang. The courtyard erupted into motion. 2 men in black rushed out from under the eaves. Take them. My brother's men immediately met them. I did not look at them at all. There was medicine in the air, the same smells as in my previous life. I followed it toward the rear courtyard. The innermost room was locked. From inside came the sound of a bowl striking the floor. Elder sister, I slammed myself against the door. The room suddenly went silent. Then a man's voice sounded from inside. Force another bowl down her. She won't last through tonight. My blood went cold. There was no time. I snatched up the wood-splitting axe leaning against the wall and hacked at the lock like a mad woman. Once. Twice. On the third blow the lock finally broke. The man inside had barely turned when I swung the axe into the porcelain medicine bowl in his hand. It shattered, splashing dark brown medicine across the floor. A girl was curled in the corner of the bed. Her hands were tied behind her back. There was almost no color in her face, and tangled hair covered half of it, but I recognized her at once. Those eyes were exactly like mother's. Elder sister. My legs went weak. The man lunged at me with a knife. I instinctively backed away, but before the blade could fall, my brother charged in from behind and kicked him to the floor. The room descended into chaos. I heard none of it. I only dropped to my knees beside the bed, my hands shaking so badly that I could not untie the rope. Elder sister, I'm here. She opened her eyes in a daze. In my previous life, by the time I found her, she could no longer recognize anyone. She stared at me for a long time, then her lips moved. My tears fell immediately. I'm away. Her eyes slowly reddened. The next moment, her whole body went limp. Elder sister. Her head fell against my shoulder, her burning forehead brushing my neck. Just before she lost consciousness completely, I heard her murmur, a strange number. She never managed to say what came after it. I froze. 20? What did she mean by 20? My brother rushed over. Take her home first. I snapped back to myself. In my previous life, my sister died on the 12th day of the 3rd month. Today was only the 2nd. I had found her a full 3 days earlier than before, and she had not swallowed that final bowl of poison. There was still a chance. There had to be. On the way home, I held her the entire time. She was so light that it frightened me. Rain drummed against the roof of the carriage. Looking down at her pale face, I remembered those 7 days from my last life, as if they were a nightmare I could never wake from. Countless times I had wondered, what if I had found her earlier? 2? 3? Now heaven had truly returned those 3 days to me. I clasped her icy hand between my palms. Elder sister, this time you are not allowed to leave me again. The carriage raced through the long streets. I could not see the future, but for the first time I thought that perhaps the Shen family's fate really could be changed. My sister remained unconscious for 2 full days. Father invited nearly every physician he could find to the Marquis household. Even retired Imperial physician Hu was summoned overnight by grandmother. After taking my sister's pulse, the old physician looked grave. The eldest miss has 2 kinds of poison in her body. My hands and feet went cold. Can she be saved? If you had found her 2 or 3 days later, not even an immortal could save her. I stared at him. What about now? He considered it for a long moment. A 60% chance. Tears nearly spilled from my eyes. 60%. In my previous life, every physician had said there was no hope at all. This time, 60% was enough. Father came to ask about her condition almost 3 times a day. My brother simply slept in the outer room. Grandmother cursed us for being useless, yet personally lit 7 long burning lamps in the Buddhist hall. Only I refused to leave my sister's side. On the second night, her fever was at its worst. She kept muttering deliriously. Some of it I understood. Water, it hurts. Don't grab me. Some of it I did not understand at all. Disinfect. 21st century. I leaned closer. Elder sister? Her eyes suddenly opened. They were eyes suddenly clear, nothing like the eyes of someone who had just emerged from a high fever. It was more as if someone had finally returned from a very distant place. We stared at each other for a long time. Elder sister. Her gaze fell on my face. First there was confusion, then her eyes slowly reddened. Ah wei, I threw myself at her. It's me. She let out a muffled groan from the force of my embrace, and I immediately pulled back. Did I press on your wound? She looked at me for a long moment, then smiled very faintly. How are you still such a crybaby? I froze. When she disappeared, I had only been 7. And I really had cried easily, but 8 years had passed. Why did she say still? I did not dwell on it. I assumed she still remembered me from childhood. Imperial physician Hu arrived quickly. After checking her pulse, his expression visibly relaxed. Waking up is a good sign. He wrote a new prescription. My sister leaned against the cushions and stared at it the entire time. When he finished, she suddenly asked, "Are these 2 herbs decocted together every day?" The room went quiet. Physician Hu looked up. Naturally. Can they be separated? Why would they be? My sister seemed to hesitate. Looking at the names on the prescription, she said, I once heard a physician say that taking these 2 together for too long would damage the liver. Physician Hu frowned. The liver? She immediately corrected herself. The internal organs. The old physician was clearly displeased. Eldest Miss Shen, do you understand medicine? A little. Where did you learn? While running for my life. That answer silenced everyone. Father stood beside the screen, his eyes reddening. Physician Hu asked no more questions. But he studied the prescription for a long time, and finally changed one of the medicines so it would be taken separately in the afternoon. After everyone left, I sat beside the bed. Elder sister, You really understand medicine? She leaned weakly against the cushions. A little. I stared at her, she stared back. After a moment I asked, then what did you mean by liver just now? The corner of her eye twitched slightly. The liver is the liver. Why didn't the physician understand? Maybe I speak in a rather advanced way. What does advanced mean? She closed her eyes. I'm going to sleep. For the first time, an odd feeling came over me. My sister seemed different somehow. But in my previous life, I had truly spent only 7 days with her, and during those 7 days she had been unconscious most of the time. I did not even know what my healthy sister was really like. Perhaps she had always been this way. On the 3rd morning, a maid brought a calming medicinal tonic. I was about to take it when my sister suddenly raised a hand. Wait. She smelled it, then asked for a silver hairpin. My expression changed. Poison? No. She dipped the silver pin into the soup and touched a drop to a white porcelain saucer, then asked the maid, who decocts this soup each day? Who brings it from the kitchen? Who handled the bowl? The maid began to tremble. My sister suddenly pointed to the pot of orchids by the paper window. Pour some into that. I stared at her. Try it, she said. An hour later, the edges of the orchid leaves began to turn black. I shot to my feet. The maid dropped to her knees. It truly wasn't me. My sister slowly leaned back against the pillows, expressionless. I didn't say it was you. Then she looked at me. Ah wei. It seems someone is very unhappy that I came back alive. I stared at the orchid as it slowly wilted. In my previous life, my sister had died 7 days after being brought home. Everyone believed the old poison had simply taken effect. But what if it had not only been the old poison? What if someone had continued poisoning her after she returned? Cold sweat slowly spread across my back. My sister looked down at her wrist, where a bluish-purple ring of bruising remained from the rope. She suddenly asked, "Since I came back, has anyone in the household asked what I brought back with me?" My heart jumped. No. She frowned as if trying to remember something. After a long time she said softly, "Then that is strange." "What is?" "They searched for so many years, how could they suddenly stop searching?" I stared at her. Searching for what? My sister raised her eyes. For an instant, I saw a vigilance in them I had never seen before. "I want to know that too." In my previous life, grandmother had coughed up her first mouthful of blood on the 18th day of the 3rd month. Today was the 15th. 3 days remained. I left my sister's room and went straight to Songhae Hall. Grandmother was at her Buddhist devotions. When I entered, she did not even turn around. "Your sister has only just awakened. Instead of staying with her, you have come to bother me again? Where is your medicine today?" I drank it. My heart tightened. "Who brewed it?" Grandmother finally turned. "Shenjiwei, have you gone mad these last few days?" I did not dare tell her that I knew she would be poisoned, but did not know where the poison came from. In my previous life, after grandmother fell ill, everyone believed her chronic illness had simply returned with age. Only after the Marquis household collapsed did a physician discover that she had been exposed to a slow-acting poison. By then it was far too late. This time I had replaced all of her medicinal ingredients in advance. I had even investigated the water used by the kitchen. There should have been no problem. "Grandmother." I crouched beside her. "For the next 3 days, will you let me inspect everything you eat or drink?" The old lady looked at me for a long time, then sighed. "You have been stubborn since you were little. Fine, inspect it." I turned Songhal upside down. Tea, pastries, incense, medicines, even the rice jar in the kitchen. Nothing. I had just begun to relax when, early the next morning, grandmother swayed as she stood up. I was beside her and caught her immediately. "Grandmother." She pressed her fingers to her temple. Only a little dizzy. My blood went cold. It had still come. Why? The medicine had clearly been changed. Imperial physician Hu hurried over. After taking her pulse, he looked grave. "There are indeed signs of poisoning, but they are still mild." I nearly shouted, "What poison?" He named one. It was the same poison as in my previous life. My face drained of color. How can that be? I inspected everything she ate or drank. What did I miss? My sister was still weak, but after hearing the news, she still came over with a servant supporting her. She did not ask what grandmother had eaten. Instead, she slowly walked around the room, looking at the incense burner, the teacups, the prayer cushion, and finally the Buddhist prayer beads in grandmother's hand. "Grandmother, may I see those beads?" Grandmother handed them to her. My sister smelled them, then examined the tiny holes through the beads. "Bring hot water." I immediately had it prepared. The prayer beads were placed in the hot water. In only a short while a very faint oily sheen appeared on the surface. My sister asked the physician to look at it. Physician Hu touched a little of it and his face changed on the spot. "The poison is on the beads." The room went utterly silent. Grandmother handled those beads every day and rarely let them leave her hand. Her fingers had been touching the poison for a long time. Then she used the same hands to take pastries and lift her teacup. Over time, of course, the poison had entered her body. My scalp prickled. In my previous life we had investigated all the medicine and food, yet no one had ever suspected a string of Buddhist beads. "Who gave these to you?" I asked. Grandmother's face darkened. The old nanny beside her answered, "Second madam gave them to the old madam before New Year." As soon as she finished, footsteps sounded outside. Second aunt, Madame Liu, entered with several maids. "Mother, why did you suddenly summon a physician?" Then she saw the prayer beads on the table, and her voice stopped. Grandmother looked at her coldly. "Where did these beads come from?" Second aunt's face went white. "I prayed for them at a temple." "Which temple?" "White Horse Temple." My sister suddenly spoke. "White Horse Temple does not use this kind of sealing wax on its prayer beads." Second aunt turned toward her. "Zhoning, you have only just returned. What would you know?" My sister was very calm. "I really do not know much about temples. But I understand medicinal wax." Second aunt looked even worse. Just then, a young maid suddenly fell to her knees. "Old madam, please judge fairly. A few days ago, this servant saw someone from the eldest Mrs. Courtyard touch the prayer beads." Every gaze in the room snapped toward my sister. My heart chilled. So it had begun. In my previous life, my sister had died too quickly for me ever to see this scene. Now that she had survived, someone had started actively trying to smear her name. Second's aunt seized on the accusation like a lifeline. What? You saw clearly? The maid cried and nodded. This servant saw Chuntao from the eldest Mrs. Room come to Song Hall. I laughed outright. Chuntao? Yes, Chuntao. 2 days ago I transferred Chuntao to the outer courtyard to decoct medicine. She has not entered the inner residence at all. The maid's face stiffened. I tossed a handkerchief onto the table. And for the past 2 days, I made everyone in Songhae Hall, who touched grandmother's belongings, wash their hands in the same basin of soapberry water. Anyone who handled these beads should still have traces of the medicinal wax under their fingernails. My sister raised her eyes to me, clearly not expecting that I had gone that far. I looked over everyone. Hands out. The maids behind second aunt all turned pale. At last an old servant woman at the very back hid her right hand inside her sleeve. My brother stepped forward at once and dragged her out. There really were pale yellow wax marks beneath her fingernails. It wasn't me, the woman shrieked. The eldest miss told me to silence. A cool male voice sounded from the doorway. I turned. A young man in the official robes of the Court of Judicial Review entered. His brows were sharply defined and a saber hung at his waist. Grandmother frowned. The newcomer saluted. Shi Tingzhou, an official of the Court of Judicial Review. His gaze fell on the prayer beads on the table. Someone has been smuggling poison out of the Imperial Storehouse for restricted medicines. The Court of Judicial Review has been investigating it for half a month. I did not expect to find it today in the Yongning Marquis household. My heart sank. An Imperial forbidden poison. This was even bigger than I had imagined. He looked over everyone present, then finally fixed his eyes on me. 12th Miss Shen. I heard that starting yesterday, you had already begun checking all the medicine and food in Songhae Hall. I said nothing. He continued, how did you know the old madam would be poisoned? For the first time, I realized that rebirth did not give me only advantages. If one person always appeared a step ahead of every disaster, sooner or later, someone would ask why she knew. I raised my eyes. Then why investigate? Because I am filial. The room went so quiet that a pin could have been heard falling. My sister suddenly lowered her head and coughed, as if suppressing a laugh. His face remained expressionless. Miss Shen's filial devotion has excellent timing. I smiled too. Lord Shi's suspicion also chooses its targets very well. The first time I met him, I knew we probably would not get along very well. Xie Tingzhou remained at the Marquis household for 3 full days. He investigated the prayer beads, the servant who applied the poison, and second aunt. In the end, the beads had indeed entered the household through second aunt's hands. But she claimed she had bought them from a pilgrim, and the servant woman had accepted silver from someone whose banknotes came from a banking house that had been closed for half a year. Every trail ended cleanly. My unease grew stronger. None of this had appeared in my previous life. In other words, now that my sister had survived, things that had once remained hidden were beginning to rise to the surface. He, however, seemed to devote more and more attention to me. The second time he questioned me, he asked, why did you have every entry and exit from Song Hall recorded in advance? Why replace the medicine? Filial devotion. Why did you know medicine was not the only possible route of poisoning? Intelligence. He looked at me. Miss Shen. If you were ever interrogated at the Court of Judicial Review, I suspect you would be very difficult to question. I smiled. Lord Shi, do not worry. I will try not to break the law. He must not often have met people so unwilling to cooperate. His expression became even colder. When I left the study, my sister was sitting in the corridor, sunning herself. Her complexion had improved considerably. I went over and repeated everything Xie Tingzhou had asked me. That man is irritating. My sister said, he is doing the right thing. I glared at her. Whose side are you on? The evidence. She looked at my unhappy face and smiled. If an investigator believed you just because you were pretty, born into a Marquis household, and cried twice, that would be frightening. I sneered. I did not cry. You cried a lot when you were little. Elder sister. All right, I won't say it. She lowered her eyes to an account book. This is the household's register of medicinal purchases. Xie Tingzhou had it brought over to compare with the source of the poison. She read for a long time, then suddenly asked, how much realgar does this household use in a year? How would I know? The ledger says 27 jin were purchased in 3 months. I paused. Is that a lot? Unless dozens of people in this household soak themselves in realgar every day. She circled several figures with a brush. Pinellia, aconite, cinnabar. The quantities entering the storeroom are all wrong. I frowned. Could the accountants simply be stealing money? Possibly. She picked up another ledger. But the outgoing entries match. What does that mean? My sister considered how to explain. Someone buys 10 jin of medicine, records 20 jin, and then fabricates usage records to prove all 20 jin were consumed. Where did the extra money and the unrecorded medicine go? No one knows. A chill ran over my back. This was not simple embezzlement. Someone had been using the Marquis household's accounts to launder medicinal purchases, including imperial forbidden drugs. That evening, when Xie Tingzhou returned, my sister pushed the account book toward him. Lord Xi, take a look. And it turned a few pages. His gaze sharpened. Who noticed this? I pointed to my sister. He looked at her. Eldest Miss Shen understands accounts? A little, my sister replied. I almost laughed. Recently she understood a little about everything. He immediately ordered all medicinal purchase records from the previous 3 years sealed. By late that night, they discovered that one of the 3 pharmacies supplying the household had connections to imperial medicinal procurement. It was called Jiren Hall. When my sister heard the name, the teacup in her hand stopped halfway to her lips. What is it? I asked. She did not answer at once. After a long time, she said, the estate where I was imprisoned. A medicine cart came every 15 days. The lantern on that cart carried the name Jiren Hall. My heart jumped. Are you certain? Certain. He immediately asked, where is the estate? My sister looked at him. Southeast of the capital, in the countryside. I do not remember the exact road. I knew she was not telling the whole truth. She was afraid. That was the place where she had been imprisoned for 2 years. For the first time, I saw her fingers tremble slightly. I reached out and held her hand. You do not have to go. She looked at me. After a moment, she clasped my hand back. I'm going. Away. I can't run from this once and keep running every time afterward. The next day, my sister and I left the Marquis household together for the first time. Xie Tingzhou objected. I asked, without my sister, can you find the estate? He fell silent. I continued, without me, do you know which road she was taken along when she was a child? He looked at me. 12th Miss. You are very good at making it impossible for people to refuse you. I smiled. Thank you. That was not praise. My sister, sitting beside us in the carriage, suddenly murmured, the 2 of you are actually quite well matched. I whipped my head around. Elder sister. He also looked over. My sister immediately closed her eyes. I'm asleep. My sister was becoming stranger by the day. The estate outside the capital was more desolate than I had imagined. Half the wall had collapsed and weeds grew everywhere. My sister stood at the entrance for a long time without stepping inside. I held her hand. If you are afraid, we do not have to go in. She shook her head. I'm not afraid. I just dislike it. She said those words lightly, but I knew that anything she could dismiss with nothing more than, I dislike it, was probably something that had once nearly killed her. We searched the estate for 4 hours and found nothing. Then his men discovered an underground chamber. Inside were only rotted sleeping mats and iron chains. The walls were covered with scratch marks. My chest tightened at the sight. My sister remained calm. She crouched and ran her hand along the wall. There was something hidden behind this mortar seam. A small piece of oiled paper was concealed behind the brick. Inside lay half of a torn prescription sheet, covered in medicinal names and dosages. He studied it. An ordinary prescription. My sister said nothing. Her gaze had fallen on the lower right corner, where there was a strange hook-shaped symbol. I suddenly remembered seeing her draw something similar in her room. What is this? She looked away. Something I scribbled when I was little. You scribbled this when you were 8? I stared at her. For the first time, I clearly felt that she had another secret. Not the secret of 8 years spent wandering and fleeing. Something deeper. We continued toward the back courtyard. My sister suddenly stopped. There used to be a locust tree here. You remember? I remember the first time I escaped, I climbed the wall from here. She said it calmly. I fell and broke a rib. My steps stopped. She continued walking. Later, I hid in a firewood cart. They caught me the next day and locked me up for 7 days without food. I could not listen anymore. Stop. My sister looked back. My eyes were already red. Instead, she smiled. It's over. It is not over. My voice trembled. For me, I have only just learned it. In my previous life, I knew only that she had been missing for 8 years. I did not know where she had been or what suffering she had endured. During the 7 days after she was brought back, all my attention had been on the poison. Then she died, and those 8 years became a blank forever. Worse, I had once doubted her because of the so-called evidence Lu Huijin showed me. For an instant, I could not even bear to look at her. My sister noticed. Ah Wei? What is wrong? Nothing. She stared at me for a long time. Lately, you always look as if you owe me a great deal of money. My eyes stung and I almost laughed. If only what I owed her could be repaid with money. She did not press me. On our way back to the city, an arrow suddenly shot from the woods. Down! Xie Tingzhou pulled me down as the arrow scraped past the carriage window. Outside, the clang of weapons immediately erupted. My sister moved even faster than I did. She kicked over the small table inside the carriage, grabbed a shard of porcelain, and cut through a rope. Behind us, I froze. What? She had already pushed open a panel at the rear of the carriage. I had never even known the carriage had such a panel. How did you know? Guessed. Run first. Another arrow flew into the carriage. We tumbled out the back. The moment we landed, a man in black rushed at us. My heart nearly stopped. My sister grabbed a handful of mud from the ground and flung it straight into his eyes. The instant he squeezed them shut, she kicked hard into the back of his knee. It was not elegant, but it was useful. I stared at her in shock. She grabbed my hand. I'll explain when staying alive is no longer the priority. We ran into the woods. Footsteps came closer behind us. My sister suddenly stopped. Why? The wind is coming from there. And there is water. Before I understood, she dragged me down the slope. There really was a river below. By the time Xie Tingzhou and his men caught up, we had already followed the river for several dozen zhang, while the attackers' footprints had been broken apart and washed away by the water. Once the danger passed, he looked at my sister for a long moment. Eldest Miss Shen, did you often have to flee for your life? My sister wrung water from her soaked sleeve. More or less. I stared at her. She turned toward me. Away? If you keep looking at me like that, I'm going to wonder whether something has grown on my face. I did not answer. For the first time, I truly understood that the sister in my memories had never been the whole of her. The pale, weak woman lying on a bed, unable even to swallow water, had only been what she looked like during the final 7 days of her life. Before that, she had struggled and escaped. She had learned to recognize medicines. She had learned to evade pursuers. At 8 years old, she had already known how to hide a scrap of a prescription inside a wall. And in my previous life, until the day she died, I had never truly known my own elder sister. The 22nd day of the 3rd month arrived. From the moment I opened my eyes after rebirth, I had been waiting for a fire. In my previous life, at midnight on this very day, the Western accounting room of the Marquis household caught fire. The blaze was enormous and destroyed nearly 10 years of old accounts. Later, when father was accused of treason, many records that might have proved his innocence were already gone. So this time I had prepared everything in advance. Water jars, wet blankets, twice as many night watchmen. I even made my brother inspect the roof of the accounting room. The midnight hour came. No fire. 1 to 3 in the morning passed. Still no fire. By 3 to 5 before dawn, nothing had happened. I stood in the courtyard in the cold wind for half the night and, for the first time, had an absurd thought. Had the future changed because my sister was alive? Go back inside, Xie Tingzhou said from under the corridor roof. No one is setting a fire tonight. I frowned. How do you know? Anyone who truly intended to burn this place would see so many people guarding it and change methods. The instant he finished, a faint sound came from the corner wall. His eyes lifted sharply. There. A dark figure vaulted over the wall. He carried no lamp oil. Instead, he headed straight for the accounting room. My brother's men surrounded him. The intruder was highly skilled and wounded 3 men before Xie Tingzhou personally forced him to the ground. When they searched him, they found no tinderbox. Only a piece of paper. On it was a single code number. Xie Tingzhou glanced at the accounting room. He did not come to burn the records. He came to find something. My heart sank. In my previous life, the enemy had simply burned everything. Why steal now? Because we had already begun investigating the old accounts. The enemy had realized there was danger. They were changing too. I looked into the dark night. For the first time, I understood that my memories of the previous life were not a map that would remain correct forever. Once I changed the road, the map changed with it. On the way back to my courtyard, I was so distracted that I missed a step and pitched forward. A hand suddenly caught me around the waist. Xie Tingzhou pulled me upright, but my foot landed squarely on the back of his hand. His expression changed. Once I was steady, I looked down. Lord Xi, does it hurt? What do you think? I could not help laughing. He looked at me coldly. Is that very funny? A little? 12th miss. Next time I may consider letting you fall. You won't. The words left my mouth before I realized what I had said. I froze. He looked at me too. I did not know why I was so certain. Perhaps because in all the real danger of these past days, the person who seemed to trust me the least had never hesitated even once. When I returned to the main hall, Lu Huijin was there. I had not seen him for a long time. In my previous life, at this point we had already been betrothed for half a year. He had been the person I trusted most. After my sister died, he was also the one who stayed beside me through the worst period of my life. He said he would help me investigate the truth. Later, he showed me a letter written partly in my sister's hand. It seemed to prove that she had willingly contacted the people who harmed the Shen family. That letter was the first reason I ever doubted her. Only before my own death did I learn that the upper half had been genuine and the lower half had been replaced. Luai Jin saw me and smiled gently. Ah Wei. My hand instantly went cold. He came closer. I heard the household has been unsettled lately. I've been worried about you. In my previous life, that sentence would have made my eyes redden. This time I simply looked at him for a long while. His smile faltered. What is it? Nothing. I took one step back. Young Master Lu. His face finally changed. You never used to call me that. I smiled faintly. People change. Before he could answer, my sister stepped out from behind the screen and looked between us. Who is this? I answered calmly. Lu Huijin. Oh, my sister nodded. So this is the one. She abruptly stopped. I looked at her suspiciously. The one what? Nothing. He looks rather like a sad person. I almost laughed aloud. Lu Huijin's expression darkened. Eldest Miss Shen seems to have misunderstood me. My sister glanced back. Perhaps. Sometimes I misjudge people. She thought for a moment. But usually I'm fairly accurate. After Lu Huijin left, I finally asked, Elder sister, why did you say he looks like a bad person? She countered. Doesn't he? How would you know? When he looks at you, his eyes and his mouth do not quite match. What does that mean? His mouth is smiling, his eyes are calculating. I froze. My sister patted my shoulder. Little sister, when you choose a man, you cannot choose only by whether he is handsome. I glared at her. Who is choosing a man? She nodded. Understood. Then she looked outside. Xie Tingzhou happened to be passing under the corridor. My sister added, if you do choose, the one outside is better than the one just now. Shenzhou's. She fled at once. I stood there inexplicably feeling my ears grow warm. The day of my brother's riding accident drew closer. In my previous life, on the 7th day of the 4th month, he rode Feikong, his favorite black horse, to the training grounds outside the city. The horse suddenly went mad and threw him down a slope. His right leg broke, and he never returned to the army. Later, when the Shen family fell into trouble, he dragged that injured leg everywhere begging for help, and eventually died outside the prison gates. This time, 3 days in advance, I had Feikong replaced and ordered the fodder inspected. As expected, they found a drug in the feed that could drive a horse into a frenzy. My brother exploded in anger. Who did this? I did not know. This trail had never been investigated in my previous life. Xie Tingzhou took the stableman away for questioning. My sister, however, kept watching me. That night she suddenly came to my room. Ah Wei, what is it? You knew brother was going to have an accident. The tea in my hand nearly spilled. Why would you say that? You stopped him from riding Feikong 3 days ago. You also had the slope outside the training grounds searched. Before grandmother was poisoned, you replaced her medicine. Before something happened to the accounting room, you guarded the accounting room. Before brother's horse feed was drugged, you changed his horse. She stared at me. Ah Wei, how do you know? I looked away. Coincidence. Fine. She stood. If you won't say forget it, relaxed. She reached the door and stopped without turning back. But from now on, do not ask me why I understand those strange things either. My heart tightened. She said quietly, you are allowed to have secrets. So am I. The door closed. I did not sleep that night. The next day my sister disappeared. More accurately, she slipped out of the residence without telling anyone. I nearly lost my mind. She did not return until dusk when my brother brought her back. There was a knife wound on her arm. The instant I saw blood, the image of her dying in my arms in my previous life crashed over me. I ran toward her. Where did you go? She was pale. To investigate Jiren Hall. Why didn't you tell me? If I told you, would you have let me go? Of course not. That is why I did not tell you. I trembled with anger. Do you know people are trying to kill you? I know. You know and you still went? Her expression darkened too. Then should I stay inside the residence forever? At least you would be safe. Safe? She pointed toward the Buddhist beads that had poisoned grandmother. Is being at home the same thing as being safe? Shen Zhaoning. It was the first time I had called her full name in anger. I finally managed to save you. The room went silent. My sister stared at me, and then, my throat tightened. Her voice was very soft. Ah Wei, are you protecting me, or are you raising a bird because you are terrified it will die again? At that moment, all the pressure and fear of the past month burst apart. Because you really did die. She froze. My tears fell immediately. You died. After I found you, you lived only 7 days. You coughed blood every day. In the end, you could not even speak. You died right in my arms. I begged everyone, and no one could save you. My sister did not move. I could not stop. Then grandmother died. Father was imprisoned. The Shen family was destroyed. In the end, I died as well. Is that enough? That is why I know everything. All color left my sister's face. After a long time, she walked toward me slowly. I instinctively stepped back. She pulled me into her arms. The embrace was gentle yet firm. I went rigid. Her palm rested against the back of my head. Ah, Wei. I was crying too hard to speak. Last time. Her voice had gone hoarse. When I died, were you there too? I nodded. She held me tighter. Then you must have been very afraid. I broke down completely. Since my rebirth, this was the first time anyone had asked whether I was afraid. Everyone had only seen that I had become cautious, decisive, clever. Only my sister asked, "You must have been very afraid." I clung to her and cried like the 7-year-old I had once been. That night, neither of us asked the other about any more secrets. But some walls had already fallen. The next day, my sister came to me on her own. Her wounded arm had been bandaged. After entering, she shut the window, then the door, and finally had me send Qingxin out as well. I looked at her. "What are you doing?" "Confessing." She sat opposite me. "Yesterday you told me your secret, now it is my turn." I sat upright. She was silent for a moment. "What I am about to say may be even more absurd than rebirth." I straightened further. Her first sentence stunned me. "Before I was born, I may already have lived once." "You were reborn too?" "No." She frowned, considered, then said, "It was more like, I came into this life before I was born." "What?" "Forget the term." She rubbed her forehead. "Imagine that before I was born into the Shen family, my soul once lived in another world." I stared at her. There was no emperor there. My first instinct was that such words were treasonous. I coughed. "Keep going." She told me about a world with very tall buildings, vehicles that did not need horses, and nights lit without candles. Women could study, hold public office, live alone, practice medicine, and even investigate causes of death. She spoke slowly, as if gathering memories from a very distant place. "I studied toxicology there, and later worked somewhere that specialized in testing and identification." "So that is why you can recognize poisons?" "I only remember some principles." "Then why did you not remember before?" "I do not know." She looked down at her hands. "After I was born into the Shen family, those memories were almost completely gone. Only a few habits remained. When I was little, I always felt that drinking unboiled water was unhygienic, and I complained that the household latrine was too close to the kitchen. I could not help saying, 'When you were 5, you argued with the steward over that once.'" My sister looked up. "You remember? Of course." She laughed. "So the memories were already there in some form. Why did they come back now?" "Maybe the high fever." She looked at me. "Or maybe because of you." "Me?" "When I opened my eyes and saw you, a great many things suddenly came back." The room fell quiet. I did not know which part I should be shocked by first. In the end, I asked, "Did you have a good life in that other world?" She froze. After a long moment, she smiled. "More or less. My parents died early. I studied alone, worked alone, ate alone. I still survived." I reached for her hand. "You won't have to be alone anymore." Her eyes suddenly reddened. She turned her face away. "Yesterday you were scolding me. Today you are trying to make me cry." My eyes stung. "You hid things from me too." "Likewise." We both laughed. Afterward, I spread paper across the table and for the first time, wrote down every important date from my previous life for her. My sister studied them for 2 full hours, then rearranged them. "You have been looking at these this time." But they should be grouped by purpose." She picked up the brush. "Grandmother is poisoned. The Shen household loses its pillar. Brother falls from his horse. The Shen family's military future is crippled. The accounting room burns. Old records disappear. Father is accused of treason. The entire Shen family is condemned. My own death, a witness is silenced." Then she drew a single line beneath everything. "Ah Wei, these are not 5 separate events." My heart slowly tightened. At the very beginning she wrote, 8 years ago Xinjiang disappears. They are one thing." I stared at those words and felt cold spread through my body. My sister continued. "If they wanted me to disappear 8 years ago, then I must already have encountered some secret when I was 8. And if they continued attacking the Shen family afterward, that secret did not end when I vanished." I thought of the old account books mother left before her death. I thought of the military grain and military medicinal supplies father had managed over the years. I thought of the imperial medicines Xie Tingzhou was investigating. Things that had once seemed completely unrelated were, for the first time, beginning to connect into a faint line. That same day, I summoned Xie Tingzhou. He looked at the table covered with papers, then at my sister and me. "You have finally decided to tell the truth?" I kept a straight face. "Part of it." He gave a cold laugh. "I am honored." My sister suddenly asked, "Lord Ji, did your father die 10 years ago?" His eyes turned sharp and cold. I looked at him in surprise. "How do you know?" "You are investigating imperial medicines, and you keep focusing on records from 10 years ago," my sister said calmly. "That is not the behavior of an ordinary official investigation." He was silent for a long time, then finally sat down. "My father was an imperial censor 10 years ago. He was investigating a military grain case in the Northwest. He died before the case was concluded. My heart jolted. 10 years ago was around the time Mother died, and only 2 years before my sister disappeared. He took an old bronze seal from his sleeve. This is the only thing he left behind. Several numbers were engraved on the seal. The moment my sister saw them, her expression changed. She took out the torn half-page of the 100 Herbs manuscript we had found at the estate. Similar numbers appeared beside the medicinal entries. I looked at her. Elder sister? She slowly said, I think I may understand why this prescription looks so strange. It is not a prescription. She looked at the fragment. It is an account. At that moment, the case from 10 years ago, my sister's disappearance 8 years ago, and the destruction of the Shen family in my previous life finally became part of the same chain. Decoding the fragment was harder than we expected. My sister could tell that the numbers were a code, but not what they corresponded to. Then Xie Tingzhou found records of the Northwestern military granaries from 10 years earlier in the old archives of the Court of Judicial Review. The first group of numbers matched granary numbers. The second matched monthly grain quantities. The third matched batches of medicinal supplies. The 100 Herbs fragment was not merely a medical text. Or rather, it had originally been part of one, but someone had used the dosages in the prescriptions to conceal a set of secret military grain accounts. More importantly, one name appeared in the fragment, Zhao Qi. When Xie Tingzhou saw it, his expression changed completely. This man died 10 years ago. Who was he? An accountant responsible for military grain transport. Officially, he died after contracting an illness on the road. My sister suddenly stood. I have seen him. Everyone looked at her. She closed her eyes. When I was 8, there was once a time I was locked in a woodshed at the estate. I heard 2 people talking outside through a crack in the door. One of them was missing a small piece of his left ear. I saw him again later when I escaped. Xie Tingzhou immediately ordered someone to find Zhao Qi's portrait from 10 years ago. When it arrived, my sister needed only one glance. That's him. A man who had supposedly been dead for 10 years was actually still alive. We followed the medicinal supply trail from Jiren Hall, and eventually found an inconspicuous warehouse in the western part of the city. Xie Tingzhou did not make an immediate arrest. We waited 2 days until late at night, a carriage finally entered the warehouse. The man who stepped down was in his 50s. A piece of his left ear was missing. My sister stood in the shadows, gripping my wrist harder and harder. That's him. We moved in that night. Zhao Qi did not escape. During interrogation, however, he denied everything. He even produced a written statement from 10 years earlier claiming that Shen Yanting, or Fi of Yongning, had privately altered the route of military grain shipments. Father instantly became a suspect in the old case. Xie Tingzhou's face turned grim. I, however, was unexpectedly calm. In my previous life, this was how Father had been condemned. Pieces of evidence appeared one after another. Every piece was real, yet somehow every arrow pointed only toward the Shen family. My sister suddenly pointed at Zhao Qi's right shoulder. His right shoulder. Xie Tingzhou looked at her. What about it? He cannot move it properly. Zhao Qi's face changed. In the portrait from 10 years ago, he used his right hand. My sister continued. If an old injury forced him to switch hands, that injury must be at least 10 years old. Xie Tingzhou immediately ordered an examination. There was a deep saber scar across Zhao Qi's shoulder, an old wound that had once cut to the bone. The archives recorded that when the military grain case broke 10 years ago, an unidentified accountant had taken a saber wound to the right shoulder during an attack in the Northwest, and later disappeared. He had been presumed dead. The dates matched perfectly. Zhao Qi finally lost his composure. For the first time I saw Xie Tingzhou truly angry. He did not slam the table or shout, he simply placed one record after another before Zhao Qi. 10 years ago you faked your death, now you have reappeared in the capital. You may refuse to confess, but your old injury, the warehouse accounts and the banknotes, cannot all keep silent. At that moment, I finally understood why my sister said that someone like him was reliable as an investigator. He did not need anyone to believe him. He needed evidence. The interrogation continued until dawn. At last, Zhao Qi spoke. He said the people in charge of military grain procurement 10 years earlier were not only officials from the Ministry of Revenue. Behind them stood members of the imperial clan. But he refused to give a name. When Xie Tingzhou came out of the interrogation room, he looked exhausted. I handed him a cup of tea. He did not take it. Afraid it is poisoned, I asked. Afraid you are taking revenge for all the times I questioned you. I laughed. He finally accepted it. We sat side by side on the steps. Dawn had just broken, washing the eaves of the Court of Judicial Review pale with morning light. I suddenly asked. How old were you when your father died? 13. You have investigated for 10 years. Never thought of giving up. I did, then why didn't you? He looked down at the tea in his hand. Because no one ever told me why he died. I fell silent. I understood that sentence too well. After my sister died in my previous life, I also spent years wanting only to know why. He suddenly asked, what about you? What about me? You seem more afraid of losing people than anyone I have ever met. My fingers tightened. He did not pursue the question. He only said, Shenjue. It was the first time he had called me directly by name. I do not know how many things you are still hiding, but after investigating this far, I have found nothing that proves you untrustworthy. I looked at him. Morning light lay across his brows and eyes. This man would not say, I trust you. What he said was, there is no evidence that you are untrustworthy. Yet strangely, those words made something in my chest ease. I lowered my head and drank my tea. Some people did not trust easily. But once such a person was willing to stand beside you, it could feel more reassuring than a lightly spoken, I trust you. The 23rd day of the 4th month arrived. I had begun preparing for it a month in advance. In my previous life, on this day, Imperial censors entered the Markeith household and found a secret letter in a hidden compartment in Father's study. The letter appeared to show correspondence with an enemy state on the northwestern frontier. It dragged the Shen family completely into disaster. This time, the hidden compartment had already been dismantled. Everyone entering or leaving the study was recorded. My brother guarded the door personally. Xie Tingzhou even stationed men around the outside. I waited from early morning into the afternoon. No censors came. Evening arrived. Still no one. At last, I breathed out. We had changed it. This time we had truly changed it. But just after 7 that evening, an urgent summons arrived from the palace for Father. An hour later, news returned. The Ministry of Revenue had accused the Marquis of Yongning of embezzling 120,000 shi of military grain. I sat in my chair for a long time without moving. It was not a treasonous letter. The charge had changed. My sister immediately asked, what evidence? My brother's face was iron gray. Accounts from 3 northwestern granaries, and Father's handwritten authorization. My hands and feet went cold. That never happened. It did not happen in your previous life, my sister said. Why this time? Because we stopped the false letter. So the enemy had chosen another method. I suddenly understood that my memories from the previous life had become completely useless. I had changed my sister's death. Grandmother had escaped the poisoning. My brother had not fallen from his horse. The accounting room had not burned. Every change was like a stone dropped into water. The ripples had already washed away the shape of the future I remembered. I did not know what would happen tomorrow. I did not know where the next blade would fall. I did not even know whether I could still save them. That night, for the first time, I truly collapsed. I locked myself in my room. The table was covered with every date I had written down from the previous life. One sheet after another had suddenly become worthless. My sister pushed open the door. She sat beside me. I said, go out. I heard you. Then why aren't you leaving? I finally looked up. I don't know anymore. She watched me. Know what? What will happen next? I don't know what will happen anymore. As soon as the words left me, tears spilled down my face. Elder sister, if I don't know, how am I supposed to save all of you? She was silent for a long time. Then she suddenly laughed. I stared at her. What are you laughing at? At Shen Zhoning. She reached out and flicked my forehead. Who lives knowing exactly what will happen tomorrow? I froze. For all those years I was gone, every day I opened my eyes without knowing whether I would be caught, whether I would have food, or what the next city would be like. I still live. She gathered up the pages filled with dates and folded them one by one. Ah, Wei, you are not clever because you got to live twice. You simply never believed that you could win without these memories. I said nothing. She took my hand. Before you knew when danger was coming. Now we know who is laying the net. What is there to fear? Someone knocked on the door. Xie Tingzhou entered. He glanced at the folded pages on the table but asked nothing. Instead, he placed a stack of case files before me, the accounts for the missing 120,000 shi of northwestern military grain. I stared at him. He said, if the future is unknown, investigate what has already happened. The past can still be investigated. I looked at him, then at my sister. Suddenly I wanted to laugh, so I did. In my previous life, by the end I had no one beside me. In this life, I no longer knew the future, but the people standing beside me were more real than any prophecy. We investigated for 2 full nights. Father's authorization was genuine. The granary accounts were genuine. The only thing that did not match was the timing. On the day 1 batch of grain supposedly left storage, Father was in the capital attending an imperial sacrificial ceremony. He could not possibly have been in the northwest to authorize it. Someone had used an old seal he had left with the army years ago. My brother found former subordinates of father overnight. Xie Tingzhou retrieved courier station records. My sister checked the granary batches again. In the end, we discovered that the so-called shortage of 120,000 shi had actually been pieced together from deficits in 3 different years. The accusation looked complete, but it had been stitched together. On the 3rd morning, father carried the full set of evidence into court. The case was ordered temporarily suspended for further investigation. I waited for him at the gate of the Marquis household. When his carriage appeared, I suddenly remembered that in my previous life, father had entered the palace during this crisis and never returned home. Now the curtain lifted, and he stepped down perfectly well. Seeing me, he frowned. "Why are you crying?" I shook my head. "Because I'm happy." For the first time, I was no longer afraid merely because the future had changed. I finally understood that what I truly wanted had always been a future completely different from the old one. The key to fully decoding the 100 Herbs fragment turned out to be Mother's old ledgers. Those account books had remained untouched in Grandmother's storeroom because they were Mother's belongings. My sister compared the medicinal dosages in the fragment with Mother's records of military supply purchases. After one night, she lifted her head. "I found it." The numbers were not amounts of money. They were granary numbers, quantities, and batch numbers. 10 years ago, military grain in 3 northwestern granaries had been systematically switched. Good grain was replaced with stale grain. Military medicines were adulterated as well. Large quantities of genuine medicinal supplies were diverted through imperial procurement channels and resold. The silver earned from those sales ultimately flowed into several estates that did not appear on official registers. Xie Tingzhou traced 2 of those estates to the residence of Prince Duan. Prince Duan's, Xiao Cheng Yue, was the emperor's younger brother by the same mother. He had spent years presenting himself as an idle prince who loved flowers and opera and never involved himself in politics. Yet for years he had controlled imperial medicinal procurement. At last, every line connected. Xie Tingzhou's father discovered irregularities in the military grain and died. Mother realized the Shen household's purchasing accounts were being used, fell ill, and died not long afterward. When my sister was 8, she accidentally saw the supposedly dead Zhao Qi at the Lantern Festival and was abducted afterward. Later, father again took responsibility for military grain and military medicines. That meant the Shen family had to disappear too. I stared at the evidence spread across the table. The net that had destroyed my entire family in my previous life had finally become visible in full. Just then, Lu Huaijin came again. He asked to see me alone. I agreed. In the flower hall, he looked much thinner than before. "Ah Wei, young Master Lu, what is it?" He looked at me. "You have traced the case to Prince Duan." My heart sank. He knew. Stop. I almost laughed. "Why? You cannot win." For the first time, his voice lost its gentleness. "Do you know how many years Prince Duan has built this network? How many court officials are connected to him? How long can Xie Tingzhou protect you?" I looked at him and suddenly asked, I stopped myself and changed the question. "If the Shen family truly fell into disaster, what would you do?" He was silent. And suddenly I already knew the answer. "You knew long ago, didn't you?" Lu Huaijin's face turned white. "At least part of it," I continued. "You knew someone wanted the Shen family dead. You knew my sister's disappearance was not an accident. You even knew about some of the things that were later used to make me misunderstand her." He cut me off sharply. "I only wanted to protect you." The room went quiet. Strangely, the answer that had tormented me for years in my previous life had finally arrived, yet it hurt less than I expected. Lu Huaijin's voice grew hoarse. The Shen family had already been marked. My father was involved too. What could I do? I could only make you leave. As long as you cut ties with the Shen family. "So you made me hate my own sister?" He said nothing. "You let me believe she betrayed the Shen family. You let me believe my father was guilty. You arranged matters so that in the end, you were the only person I could depend on." His face turned completely white. "I love you." I laughed. "Lu Huaijin, your way of saving me was to step over the bodies of my entire family." He closed his eyes. "If I could do it again, there is no if," I interrupted him. "Our betrothal is over." His head snapped up. I took out the already prepared document, dissolving the engagement. "The Lu family may sign it. If you refuse, it does not matter. The Shen family will end the engagement unilaterally." He stared at the paper for a long time without moving. Finally he asked, "Do you like Xie Tingzhou?" I froze, then found the question ridiculous. "That has nothing to do with you." I walked out of the flower hall. Xie Tingzhou was standing outside the door. I stopped. "When did you arrive?" Just now. How much did you hear? Are you asking about ending the engagement, or about whom you like? I glared at him. There was actually the faintest smile at the corner of his mouth. Lord Shi. Eavesdropping is not part of the Court of Judicial Review's rules, is it? No. Then why were you listening? Personal business. This man was learning bad habits. Before we could say anything more, my sister suddenly ran toward us from the far end of the corridor. Ah, wait, I turned immediately. What happened? One page of the fragment is missing. My face changed. In the next instant, someone screamed outside the courtyard. Eldest miss. I turned again. Two men in black dropped from the wall behind my sister. One threw something that released a cloud of white smoke. I heard only my sister shout, "Don't come over!" before the smoke swallowed everything. When it cleared, she was gone. My whole body turned cold. In my previous life, when she had been taken away, I was only 7. I could do nothing. This time the same thing would not happen again. Xie Tingzhou grabbed my wrist. Do not run blindly. I whipped around. He was already crouching. On the ground lay a short piece of broken red thread. It is from her wrist. I understood at once. She left it deliberately. There was more than one piece. The red thread led all the way out through a side gate, another segment appearing every few dozen paces. Tears almost came to my eyes. Even while being abducted, this woman had remembered to leave me a trail. Follow it. I wiped my tears away. This time, I am bringing her back myself. The red thread continued to the west side of the city. Beside the final piece were 3 marks pressed into the mud, 1 circle and 2 vertical strokes. I did not understand. Xie Tingzhou frowned as well. My brother was nearly frantic. What does it mean? Then I suddenly remembered that my sister had once taught me a little about the numerals used in her other world. 12. My brother stared. What? Number 12. I lifted my head sharply. Warehouse 12. There were 15 old medicine warehouses in the Western District. When we reached warehouses 12, it was already on fire. My heart seemed to stop. Elder sister. I rushed toward the flames, but Xie Tingzhou yanked me back. Rear door. We circled around and broke through the back entrance. A man lay on the ground inside, his hands and feet tied tightly. My brother stared. Who tied him? My sister's voice came through the smoke. I did. She emerged with her hair in complete disarray, one corner of her robe still on fire. I ran over and hugged her so hard that she staggered backward 2 steps. Gentler, she protested. You still know what pain is? I shouted through tears. She patted my back. I'm not dead. Shut up. All right. Only later did I learn what had happened. The 2 men who abducted her assumed a young woman would be easy to control. They forgot that for 8 years the skill my sister had practiced most was escaping. She used a thin blade hidden inside her hairpin to cut her bonds, then took advantage of the 2 men arguing to scatter medicinal powder at them. The man tied on the floor was a steward from Prince Duan's residence. More importantly, he carried an entry pass to one of Prince Duan's private military compounds. It was the final piece of evidence. 3 days later, the case was heard before the emperor. Prince Duan did not confess immediately. He even accused the Shen family of fabricating evidence to frame a member of the imperial clan. But this time the case did not rest on one letter or one person's testimony. There were the military granary numbers from 10 years earlier, the Imperial's medicinal storehouse accounts, the records from 3 secret medicine warehouses, evidence that Zhao Qi had faked his death, testimony from surviving military witnesses, the old bronze seal left by Xie Tingzhou's father, the entry pass to Prince Duan's private military compound carried by his steward, and mother's old accounts. 1 line of evidence could be forged. 10 interlocking lines could not all be erased at once. Prince Duan was stripped of his title and imprisoned. The officials involved in the case were investigated one after another. The Liu family was implicated because it had known part of the truth years earlier and failed to report it. Liu Huaijin did not ultimately go to prison, but his official future was destroyed. I later heard that he left the capital. I never saw him again. Father was cleared of suspicion. My brother returned fully to military service. Grandmother's health slowly recovered. As for second aunt, she truly had known nothing about Prince Duan's old conspiracy. But for her own benefit, she had bribed servants and used the poisoned prayer beads to harm grandmother. Grandmother divided the household and sent her branch away. Not every bad person was part of some earth-shaking conspiracy. Some were simply greedy. Some were simply jealous. Some merely believed they could harm their own family without paying a price. Now the price had come. On the day everything ended, my sister and I sat in the courtyard where mother once lived. She suddenly took out a tiny piece of old paper. For you, I unfolded it. The paper was very worn and the writing was so faded it was almost invisible. There was only 1 sentence. Ah Wei, do not trust Liu Huaijin. My hand shook. Where did this come from? My sister lowered her voice. from a hidden layer inside one of my old garments. It was found when the garment was taken apart while I was recovering. She paused. I already understood. In my previous life, before my sister died, she had kept clutching at the front of her clothes. She had mumbled something like, "Don't let them find." I had always thought she was asking me to protect some piece of evidence, so she had also been trying to leave me one final warning. I stared at the sentence. Tears fell onto the paper. "Don't cry." My sister reached over and wiped my face. "You'll blur the ink." I caught her hand. "Elder sister, in my previous life I failed to save you." She looked at me, "But you found me." "Too late, you still found me." I cried even harder. She sighed helplessly. "Shen Jiwei, how can you cry this much in both lives?" I burst out laughing, then threw my arms around her again while still laughing and crying. At last, I understood. I had always believed heaven let me return so I could save my sister. But in my previous life, even with her final breath, she had also been desperately trying to save me. Neither of us owed the other. There had only been a road we failed to finish walking in our last life. This time, we finally had the chance to walk it together. A year later, my sister opened a women's medical clinic in the capital. She did not personally conduct consultations. She mainly prepared medicines, identified poisons, and trained female medical practitioners. She said that in her other world, many women could be physicians, and women here should be able to do the same. At first, grandmother complained that she was showing herself in public too much. Later, the clinic cured one of grandmother's old friends of an illness that had tormented her for years. Grandmother immediately sent the clinic a plaque. Grandmother talked tougher than anyone, but her actions always gave her away. My brother was stationed near the capital. Father no longer concerned himself only with military affairs. He began pushing for a new system of cross-checking military grain and military medicines. Xie Tingzhou was promoted to junior minister of the Court of Judicial Review. As for me, I took over most of the Marquis household's estates and businesses, and began helping father organize military supply accounts. I once believed that changing fate had to be something earth-shattering. Later I learned that a truly different life was much simpler. It was my sister still being there each morning to fight me for the final piece of osmanthus cake. It was grandmother still sitting in the courtyard scolding both of us for having no manners. It was my brother returning home each time with a pile of ugly pieces of jewelry from the frontier. It was father wearing the same stern face every day. And it was someone who always appeared at the gate of the Marquis household before I was ready to leave. Xie Tingzhou had come to take me to examine case files. My sister leaned against the doorway with a knowing look. "Investigating another case?" She handed me a food box with osmanthus cake and tea. "Eat it on the road." I looked down at the food box in my hands. She nodded knowingly. "I understand." "Understand what?" "Young people." I glared at her. "Shen Jiaoning." Be quiet." Xie Tingzhou happened to walk over and looked between us. "What are you arguing about?" My sister answered first. "She is shy." "Elder sister." She laughed and ran away. I angrily turned to chase her, but Xie Tingzhou caught my sleeve. "Do not chase her. Let go." "She is right." I stopped. "About what?" He looked down at me. "Being shy." Heat rushed to my ears. "I am not." "Oh." His voice was calm. "Then the question I originally planned to ask today can wait until later." I immediately became wary. "What question?" "Nothing." He started walking. I hurried after him. "Explain yourself." At last he smiled. "After the case ended, didn't you ask whether I was free?" My steps slowed. "That was a long time ago. I didn't think you remembered." "I did have time then," he said. "And I should have time in the future too." I looked at him. Suddenly I understood. My cheeks slowly heated. Behind us, my sister leaned around the gate and shouted, "Shen Jiwei, are you going or not?" I turned. "Going where?" "To get engaged." The entire Marquis household went silent. The next instant, grandmother's scolding came from inside. "Shen Jiaoning, your sister is not even married yet, and you dare arrange her engagement yourself?" My brother laughed so hard he nearly fell off the steps. Father came out looking grim. For the first time, Xie Tingzhou looked slightly uncomfortable. Standing among all of them, I suddenly laughed too. In my previous life, the last memories this residence left me were firelight, crying, and my home shattered around me. In this life, it was the same courtyard and the same people. Yet they were so noisy my ears hurt. How wonderful. For many years afterward, my sister would still occasionally say things none of us understood. She talked about probability, disinfection, psychological age, and something called a mobile phone that allowed people even 1,000 apart to speak to each other. My brother did not believe her. Grandmother called it nonsense. Father told her to read fewer strange books. Xie Tingzhou, on the other hand, seriously asked, if such a thing truly existed, would it make investigating cases much easier? My sister froze, then laughed until she could not stand straight. Only I knew that all of those things came from a world we could never reach. Once I asked her, "Do you want to go back?" She thought for a long time and finally shook her head. "That place was good, but all of you are here." She looked at grandmother sunning herself in the courtyard, at my brother arguing with father about military grain, and finally at me. "Besides, I have already come back once." I understood. She was not talking about the other world. She meant the Shen family. At 8, she disappeared from this home. At 16, she finally returned, and after I lived one life over again, I finally truly brought my sister home. Not a pitiful girl waiting for me to protect her, but Shen Zhaoning, the sister who called me foolish, who secretly climbed walls, who recognized poisons and checked accounts, and who even while being abducted remembered to leave a trail for me. Many years later, I sometimes still dreamed of the rain from my previous life. I dreamed of the ruined temple. I dreamed of my sister's cold hands. But every time I woke in terror, all I had to do was push open the window. The courtyard next door would always have a light on. Sometimes my sister had not yet gone to sleep. Sometimes she was already awake. Her busy shadow moved across the paper window. Then I knew that my previous life was truly over. In this life, grandmother was alive. Father was alive, my brother was alive, my sister was alive too, and at last I no longer needed to keep counting the dates on which terrible things had once happened. From the day we changed the fate that should have killed my sister, the future no longer belonged to my previous life. It belonged to us. I once believed rebirth was heaven's answer to me. Later I learned that rebirth only gave me another chance to choose. What truly led me out of that dead end was my sister, Shen Zhaoning, the sister who should have died in my arms, who had suffered for 8 years and still dared to trust her family again, and the version of myself who finally learned to stop depending on the past. One evening, my sister sat outside her clinic, drying medicinal herbs in the sun. I returned from the Court of Judicial Review, and Xie Tingzhou brought me to the door. Seeing us, my sister suddenly gave us a strange smile. "What?" I asked. She shook her head. "Nothing. I just suddenly thought this was a lovely sight." I walked over. "What is good about it?" She put a basket of dried herbs into my hands. "Everyone is still here." I froze. The setting sun was falling at the end of the long street. The city was noisy with life. Carriages moved slowly past. Somewhere in the distance, a vendor was calling out, selling osmanthus candy. Xie Tingzhou stood below the steps. My brother was riding back from the end of the street. A young servant sent by father was urging us to hurry home for dinner. I suddenly smiled. Yes, everyone was still here. My sister raised a hand and patted my head just as she had when we were children. "Come on, let's go home." I linked my arm through hers. All right. This time, we would go home together. No one would ever be left behind again. By the 3rd year after my sister opened her clinic, she suddenly made a solemn announcement at dinner. "I'm going to lose weight." The entire household reacted as if facing an enemy invasion. Grandmother had just picked up a piece of braised pork. Father had just served himself a second bowl of rice. My brother still had half a chicken leg in his mouth. Xie Tingzhou sat beside me and was about to put a piece of sweet and sour fish into my bowl. Everyone stopped at the same time. I reacted first. "What does lose weight mean?" My sister put down her chopsticks with a serious expression. "It means eating a little less." My brother looked down at her bowl. It was already empty. Then he looked at the plates beside her. Only bones remained of the ribs. 4 chicken wings had disappeared. She had also eaten more than half a plate of osmanthus sticky rice lotus root. After a moment of silence, my brother asked, "And you call this eating less?" My sister did not change expression. "This is the final meal." Grandmother frowned. "Why would you eat less?" "I've gotten fat." Grandmother immediately flared up. "Nonsense." She dropped the piece of braised pork directly into my sister's bowl. "Have you forgotten how thin you were when you came home? We finally put some flesh on you and now you dare try to lose it?" "Grandmother." I suppressed a laugh. My sister had indeed become much healthier over the years, but she was still nowhere near fat. 2 days earlier, she had tried on an old dress she used to wear and found that the waist was about 1 cun too tight. After that, she kept muttering something about body fat. I asked what body fat meant. She said it was not important. Apparently it was very important. My sister tried to explain. "Grandmother, I'm not refusing to eat. I'll just eat a little less at dinner from now on." Grandmother sneered. "How much less?" "Half." "Someone come." Grandmother immediately called for a nanny. "From now on, add 1 stewed chicken dish to the eldest Mrs. dinner." "Grandmother," and another bowl of bird's nest soup. My brother finally burst out laughing. My sister turned and glared at him. "What are you laughing at?" He immediately lowered his head to eat, his shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. Father was comparatively calm. He looked at my sister. Why did you suddenly decide you were fat? My sister went silent. I helpfully supplied. She can't fit into that old dress anymore. Father and brother both coughed. My sister whipped around. Shen Jiwei. I immediately hid behind Xie Tingzhou. I'm only stating a fact. He naturally shifted his chair forward a little, blocking the chopstick she was about to throw at me. My sister narrowed her eyes. You are protecting her? He said calmly. What she said is true. I nearly collapsed over the table laughing. After dinner, my sister officially began her weight loss plan. On the first morning, she ate only half a bowl of congee. Grandmother sat opposite her and stared. That's all you are eating? It's enough. A quarter of an hour later, a nanny carried in a basket of steamed soup dumplings. The old madam says the eldest miss is weak. My sister protested. I am not weak. The nanny smiled benevolently. If the old madam says you are weak, then you are weak. On the second day, my sister decided to walk more. She had barely gone 2 streets from the Marquis residence when my brother rode after her. Get in the carriage. I'm walking. The sun is too strong. I'm exercising. My brother frowned. What does exercising mean? Walking more. Then I'll walk with you. And so the dignified young general of the capital garrison, Shen Xingzhou, led his horse beside my sister. After roughly half an hour, my brother complained, You're too slow. Walk faster. My sister sped up. He sped up too. Before long, their stroll had turned into competitive speed walking. I watched from the carriage in disbelief. What are they doing? Xie Tingzhou lifted the curtain, took one look and said, possibly competing to see who collapses first. On the third day, my sister decided she would stop eating sweets. That day Xie Tingzhou came to the residence and happened to bring me a box of osmanthus cakes. My sister passed by, stopped, looked at them once, and kept walking. 2 steps later she came back. Where did you buy those? New from the pastry shop. What filling? Osmanthus honey. My sister went silent, then walked away with tremendous determination. I was so moved I nearly applauded. An hour later, I went to find her. She was sitting in her own courtyard with an entire box of identical osmanthus cakes on the table. She was eating the 3rd piece. When she saw me, her hand stopped. I looked at the box, then at her. She slowly swallowed. This does not count. Why not? I walked a great deal today, so I already burned it off. I did not understand the logic, but it sounded convincing. That evening, after weighing herself, her face looked even worse. The next day, she announced that she was no longer trying to lose weight. Grandmother was immediately satisfied. You should have done that from the beginning. Father nodded. My brother said, I knew you wouldn't last 3 days. My sister looked at him coldly. Have you been very idle lately? My brother became wary. Why? My clinic needs someone to move medicinal supplies. The next morning, Shen Xingzhou, a young general of the capital garrison, was seized and taken to the clinic, where he carried 20 baskets of herbs from morning until night. When he came home, he held his lower back with one hand and looked as if life had lost all meaning. I asked my sister, weren't you done trying to lose weight? She leisurely drank her tea. I am. Then why did brother have to carry medicine? He talks too much. I understood at once. Some things had nothing to do with whether a person was fat. They depended mostly on how petty she was. And my elder sister was usually very petty. The first time Xie Tingzhou formally came to propose marriage, my entire family questioned him for about 4 hours. On the day our engagement was truly settled, something rather embarrassing happened in the Yongning Marca household. More accurately, it was embarrassing for him. It was his first formal visit to propose. He brought an official matchmaker and proper betrothal gifts, and even dressed more formally than usual. I had been restless in my room since early morning. My sister leaned against the door and watched me for a long time. Nervous? No, you are holding the teacup upside down. I looked down. The lid was indeed on the bottom. I silently turned it over. My sister grinned wickedly. Relax, Xie Tingzhou is not going to run away. Who is afraid he will run? Then why are your ears red? It's hot in here. My sister looked out the window. It had just snowed in the 11th month. I said nothing. Very considerately, she did not pursue the point. Before leaving, however, she added, I'll go see whether your future husband can survive today. I shot to my feet. What do you mean? She was already gone. By the time I reached the front hall, the atmosphere inside was distinctly odd. Father sat in the main seat. Grandmother sat beside him. My brother stood by the door with his arms crossed. My sister sat in the most relaxed posture of all. Xie Tingzhou sat alone in the middle, looking as if he were being interrogated at the Court of Judicial Review. The matchmaker was sweating heavily. I had only just approached the door when I heard Father ask, Junior Minister Xi, what is your annual salary? Xie Tingzhou answered honestly, my regular stipend plus grain allowance comes to roughly. Father cut in, not enough. I covered my face. The Xi family was not poor. Why was father interrogating him about salary? My brother immediately followed up. How are your martial arts? He looked at my brother. Acceptable. Then let's fight. Today? Today. Father frowned. Nonsense. I had just begun to relax when father added, finish the proposal first, fight afterward. He actually nodded. Very well. My sister sat to one side, obviously having great difficulty suppressing her laughter. Grandmother finally asked, do you know how to take care of someone? At last a normal question. He considered it. Yes. Grandmother narrowed her eyes. Specifically? For perhaps the first time, he discovered that answering grandmother's questions was harder than interrogating a criminal. She gets headaches when she sleeps too late. I froze. Her stomach becomes uncomfortable if she eats too many sweets. I froze again. Her hands and feet get cold easily when the weather is cold. Grandmother's expression softened slightly. Anything else, he thought. When she is angry, she likes to stop talking. Sister suddenly raised her hand. I can confirm that. The angrier she is, the more polite she becomes. My brother nodded too. When she was little, whenever she called me elder brother, the next thing she usually did was report me. I could no longer tolerate standing outside. Are all of you discussing a marriage proposal or exposing my faults? The room instantly went silent. Everyone turned toward me. I had no choice but to walk in. Grandmother beckoned. Come here. I sat beside her. He glanced at me. There was a tiny smile at the corner of his mouth. I glared at him. He quickly looked away. My sister suddenly said, I have a question too. A sense of doom rose inside me. Sure enough, she looked very seriously at Xietingzhou. If the two of you quarrel in the future, what are you going to do? I opened my mouth, but he answered first. Listen until she has finished. My sister nodded. And then, if I am wrong, I apologize. And if she is wrong? Everyone looked at him. It was a question with no safe answer. I looked too. He was silent for 2 breaths, then said, wait until she is no longer angry before discussing it. My sister's eyes brightened. My brother looked impressed. Even father nodded slightly. I, however, felt something was wrong. Why do all of you look as if you think I am unreasonable? No one answered. That was even more suspicious. My sister continued. Last question, what do you like about her? My face instantly heated. Elder sister, it is a proposal. Of course this should be asked, she said with complete justification. He did not evade the question. He looked at me for a long time. She is afraid of many things. The room went quiet. I stared at him. What kind of answer was that? He continued. She is afraid something will happen to her family. Afraid she will judge wrongly. Afraid she will be too late. But every time she is afraid, she still walks forward. My eyes suddenly stung. His voice remained calm. I like that she is afraid, yet has never truly retreated. The room went a little too quiet. My eyes burned. Grandmother silently lifted her teacup. Father coughed. My brother suddenly turned to look out the window. Even my sister, for once, made no joke. Then she abruptly sighed. This man really does know how to talk. The mood vanished instantly. The proposal ultimately went smoothly. At least the first half did. During the second half, my brother really did insist on a duel. The 2 men went to the training ground and the entire family went to watch. I stood beside them in agitation. My brother's face darkened. You aren't married yet and you're already protecting him? My sister snacked on seeds beside me. That's normal. I turned on her. Whose side are you on? Whoever wins. They fought for a little under an hour and ended without a clear victor. My brother sheathed his weapon. Barely acceptable. Xietingzhou saluted. Thanks for yielding. My brother sneered. I didn't yield. That evening, I walked him out of the residence. At the gate he suddenly said, You have a good family. I paused. Even after today? Why? He glanced back at the brightly lit marquee residence. Because if they are willing to scrutinize me this seriously, it means they truly care whether you will be happy afterward. For a moment I did not know what to say. After walking a little farther, I secretly hooked a finger around his. He stopped and looked down. What are you doing? I stubbornly said. I was worried my brother might have hurt you. The fight is already over. Then pretend I haven't found a reason yet. He turned his hand and clasped mine. Then you do not need a reason. My face instantly heated. At that exact moment, a sound came from behind the gate. We both turned. Half of my sister's face appeared from behind one side of the door. Half of my brother's appeared from the other. I stared at them. My sister said, Continue. My brother added, Pretend we do not exist. Furious, I picked up a ball of snow and threw it at them. Both turned and ran. He laughed beside me. For the first time, I realized that the famously cold-faced junior minister Shi of the Court of Judicial Review was actually quite handsome when he smiled. Of course, I never told my sister that. Otherwise, she would have mocked me for 3 months. My sister once decided that the whole family needed to learn modern slang. In the end, grandmother became the best at using it. Whenever life became peaceful, my sister had a remarkable talent for getting into mischief out of sheer boredom. Before New Year that year, she suddenly decided that the way we spoke was not sufficiently up to date. I had no idea what up to date meant. It means learning new expressions. Why? Because it's fun. I turned to leave. She grabbed me. Don't go. I'll teach you the easiest one first. I became extremely cautious. What? My sister said solemnly. What in there are too many things to do, and you simply stop wanting to do any of them. I thought about it. Being lazy, not exactly. Isn't it still laziness? My sister considered for a moment. Forget it. Next one. Then she taught me another modern phrase, working stiff. What kind of person is that? Someone who works hard every day to earn money. I immediately understood. A hired hand. My sister went silent for a long time. Translated like that, you are not wrong. Later she began poisoning the whole family with modern words. My brother returned from the military camp. My sister asked, is your work stink strong today? My brother stared. My what? She pointed at the dust covering his clothes. Never mind, what you have is the smell of sweat. Father stayed up until midnight checking military accounts. My sister poked her head through the door. Father, still grinding? Father frowned. Still what? Nothing. The next day, Father summoned her and made her help check the accounts for 12 straight hours. When she came back, she announced, I will never again talk about the grind in front of the boss. I asked, who is the boss? She pointed toward Father. I thought about it. That did seem accurate. Grandmother was the most outrageous of all. At first she objected more strongly than anyone. When she heard my sister say, wild, she immediately frowned. Speak properly. My sister obediently answered, yes. 3 days later, the kitchen accidentally made grandmother's sweet soup salty. Grandmother took one sip, went silent, then slowly said, wild. The whole room froze. My sister's head snapped up, eyes shining. Grandmother. Grandmother's face hardened. What? My sister stared at her. You learned it? Grandmother cut her off. Enough nonsense. From then on, everything became uncontrollable. My brother came home for New Year carrying a jade carving that was supposedly very valuable. Grandmother examined it for a long time. How much? My brother named the price. Grandmother's eyelid twitched. You were cheated, he objected. It is the work of a famous master. My sister touched it. It really is only average. Grandmother suddenly said, sucker. My brother froze completely. I spat out my tea. My sister collapsed onto the table. Grandmother, who taught you that? Grandmother continued sipping her tea unhurriedly. My brother looked lost. What does sucker mean? I wiped my mouth. You, brother. A sucker. Eventually, even Father was influenced. Once, someone at court tried to shift responsibility for missing military grain onto others. Father returned home with a terrible expression. Grandmother asked what happened. After a long silence, Father said very stiffly, I met someone trying to pass the buck. My sister nearly choked to death on her soup. Father frowned. Did I use it incorrectly? My sister raised a thumb. Perfectly standard. Father was clearly very pleased with that assessment. The next day, he learned another expression. My brother was caught slacking at the military camp. Father returned and scolded, Shinjing Zhou, have you been letting things rot lately? My brother was stunned. Father, who exactly have you been learning from? Father looked coldly at my sister. She immediately lowered her head and concentrated on eating. Xie Tingzhou was the last one to fall. At first, he firmly refused to learn. My sister asked, the Court of Judicial Review has a lot of cases, right? So you work overtime every day? What is overtime? Continuing to work after the normal end of the workday. He fell silent. Then the Court of Judicial Review works overtime every day. Sister looked deeply sympathetic. Life is hard for a working stiff. He frowned. I am not a working stiff. Do you receive a salary from the court? Yes, then, you are. He stopped speaking. I thought he would never use the expression. Then one day I accompanied him to the Court of Judicial Review to read case files. We worked until very late. I was so sleepy I could barely open my eyes and lay my head on the table. How many are left? He looked at the mountain of files beside us. He too fell silent. After a moment, he said with absolute calm, let's let it rot. I instantly woke up. What? He stood and began putting away the case files. We will continue tomorrow. I stared at him. Who taught you that? His face was expressionless. Your sister. That very night, I went home to settle accounts with her. The moment I entered Songhae Hall, however, the whole family was there. My sister was teaching grandmother another new expression. This one is especially useful. Grandmother asked, what does it mean? It means that when you see someone else having trouble, you feel a tiny bit like laughing. Grandmother thought. Taking pleasure in someone else's misfortune? Close. What is the expression? My sister smiled mysteriously. Eat melon. I stood in the doorway with a powerful sense of foreboding. Sure enough, the next day, relatives from second aunt's maternal family became involved in a dispute over ancestral property that reached the magistrate's office. When the news arrived, grandmother immediately ordered the nanny, cut up the melon. The nanny looked confused. Old madam wants watermelon, grandmother said calmly. Didn't they say that when there is excitement to watch, you should eat melon? Everyone in the room turned toward my sister. She slowly lowered her head. I finally laughed so hard I collapsed onto the table. My brother slapped his thigh while laughing. Father covered his forehead. Xie Tingzhou turned to look out the window, though his shoulders were obviously shaking. Grandmother became displeased. What are you laughing at? My sister waved her hands quickly. Nothing. Grandmother narrowed her eyes. Do you think I used it wrong? No, exactly right. Perfectly standard. Only then was grandmother satisfied. That evening, my sister found me and said with great seriousness, I've decided something. What? I can never casually teach grandmother modern slang again. Why? She glanced toward Sangha Hall, her face full of weariness. The old lady learns too quickly. I laughed until I could not stop. I truly loved days like these. No one was chasing us. No one was poisoning anyone. No one was calculating whom we needed to save next. We argued over trivial things. We could argue for half the day over a single pastry. Grandmother would suddenly blurt out some strange modern expression, and at dinner everyone would laugh so hard no one could eat. My sister once said that people in her other world called days like these quiet, peaceful days. I understood the phrase, but I did not think life needed to be too peaceful. What we had now was better. Grandmother was scolding someone. My brother was protesting his innocence. Father was frowning. Xie Tingzhou was secretly laughing. My sister was still trying to explain that eating melon did not mean literally eating a melon, and I sat among them, laughing until my stomach hurt. This was what I wanted most. Lively, noisy, and chaotic, and not one person missing.